Test, test. Test. Test, test. Test. All right, give me a test. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know if the audio is good. I think that it is. Let me know. Okay, thank you. All right, let me post a couple of announcements here. It is Sunday night, East Lansing, Michigan. Come on in, gather around, gather around, gather around. My name is Jim Comparoni, publisher, SpartanMag.com. Let's talk some Michigan State sports, talk some football, talk some transfer portal, talk Michigan State basketball. I don't know, you got any hockey questions? We might tackle some of those as well. What we do over at SpartanMag.com, it is the daily narrative of Michigan State sports over at the Underground Bunker message board. And a couple days ago, I invited Michigan State fans to post questions over there. Questions that we can field mailbag style here at Spartan Mag Live. We'll be doing that here for the next, hour and a half, 2 hours. We'll bring the tarp on the field. We'll wait a little bit. We'll roll it back off. We'll go another hour. I don't know. We'll try to keep it like an hour and a half, something like that. Jason Kill's going to be chiming in, talk Michigan State transfer portal recruiting. Michigan State with a busy weekend. Transfer portal coverage it's interesting. It's ongoing. Michigan State with some commitments tonight. We'll get to that in a moment. Sometimes you can get information. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it zigzags all over the place. Coverage over at SpartanMag.com. Ongoing. We have something called the Transfer Portal Tracker. It's a thread over there at the Underground Bunker message board. And we're updating it. We are updating it as we hear about Michigan State offers, as we hear about visits, as we get in touch with those football prospects as they visit, after they visit, if we can, or people near them or around them, and cover it, because it's vital right now. Michigan State, we heard, was going to get 20 at least in the portal this offseason. Last year they had 13 in the winter and 10 in the spring. No, other way around, 10 in the winter and then 13 in the spring. We'll see if Michigan State does it 10 and 10 this time or more in the winter. They're busy with it right now. I'd heard that there was a lot of good interest in Michigan State from players in the portal, and even players that had not entered the portal yet. They contacted coaches and mentioned they'd be interested if Michigan State would be interested. Michigan State can't really talk to them. That's the rules. I heard that they reached out to Michigan State. People that you've recruited before get back in touch with you. That's the way this portal game goes a little bit. So it's not so much that you're tampering with others. Sometimes they reach out before they enter the portal. It's the way it is. Player agents are heavily involved these days as well, as they try to get as much money as they can for their clients, which might bother some people, but it's college football. It's a big business. They're bringing in a lot of money, and some of that money is filtering down to the players. Some people would say finally. There's differences of opinion on that. There's differences of opinion on that even from former athletes. You know, players that played in the college game, football, basketball, didn't get paid. Sometimes they're not the most eager to contribute to collectives, we're finding, which is interesting. Anyway, go ahead, give us a like here on the channel. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. Go to SpartanMag.com. $1. Try it out for a week. SpartanMag.com. We'd love to have you over there as a longtime subscriber. Those of you that are longtime subscribers, we certainly appreciate everything that you've done to support Spartan Mag over the years. We expect to hear from Jason Kilp, I don't know, bottom of the hour, be 9:30 as we are recording this live, maybe a little bit later than that. We will be looking into that. Let me see what we've got here. Hold on a second. Just had something come in. All right, anyway, that's not what I thought it was. But anyway, so Michigan State commitment today from wide receiver Omari Keli, wide receiver, 6 foot, 180, Trussville, Alabama. Went to Auburn. He was a 4-star recruit. Went to Auburn, transferred to Middle Tennessee State. Didn't get a lot of action at Auburn. Went to Middle Tennessee State. 53 catches this season, 869 yards, 4 touchdowns. Also 8 punt returns, 1 punt return for a touchdown. You may have seen highlights of that over at the Underground Bunker message board, other places. He visited Michigan State this weekend and then canceled visits to Utah, Louisville, and Kansas. You know, Louisville only signed 13 recruits, I think it was, in December. And when that happens, you know they're going to be busy in the portal. And we have seen Louisville crop up as a school that some of these players are visiting in addition to Michigan State. Louisville's very busy. But Keli canceled his visits. So Michigan State has four wide receivers that are in the portal, if you count Antonio Gates, who was dismissed from the team halfway through the season. Jerron Glover, Jalen Smith, Isaiah Johnson in the portal. We had heard that Michigan State was going to revamp their wide receiver room around Nick Marsh, in addition to Nick Marsh. And shortly after the season was over, those 3 entered the portal, plus Gates. So Braylon Collier, we talked about him. High school guy from Sandusky, Ohio. Mentioned him over at the Underground Bunker message board the 2 days before signing day, and I just mentioned this guy's underrated. Looking at his senior film. Had looked at his junior film, and it was all right. Senior film was excellent. And I just made the comment on the Underground Bunker. I'm like, this guy is better than any wide receiver I see in the state of Michigan. And there's a couple of wide receivers, I think, that were 4-star recruits. Maybe one fell to 3-star. This guy was ranked like number 30 in Ohio, something like that. I'm like, this guy's underrated. Had some excellent high-point receptions. Can really elevate. Braylon Collier, wide receiver coming in, true freshman. It's always hard for a true freshman to make a big impact. Nick Marsh did. He's special. So you have Collier coming in. You have the Taplin kid coming in from Texas. But Collier, he's got to get stronger and so forth. It might take a little time, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's in the playing group. But Michigan State's in that portal looking for immediate impact playing group guys, and Omari Keli is in that category when you're talking about a guy that was first team all conference at the mid-major level. That's the type of guy that you're looking for in the portal, in my opinion. You know, you look at some of the guys that Indiana had at quarterback, defensive tackle, wide receiver, guys that were all Mid-America Conference players. That's good. That doesn't mean they're all going to be good. I mean, Maryland had that kid Husky at corner that was all MAC at corner for Kent State, I think it was. And I have not seen him play since the first couple of weeks, but I thought he was a little shaky in the first couple of games. And I mentioned in the pre-snap read that he might be someone Michigan State would target. They did target him that day and had some success. But by and large, if you're all conference at the mid-major level and in the portal, you're a proven player looking to move up. That's what this guy is. But originally he was a 4-star who signed with Auburn. Now he's making his way back to the Power 4 level. And I think he's ranked the number 80 transfer in the country. So this is a noteworthy wide receiver commitment for Michigan State. Coming out of high school, he's ranked number 284 player in the country. I saw some of his highlights against Memphis. Had 6 catches for 174 yards for Middle Tennessee State against Memphis. 68 yards on a deep post from the slot position. I've seen him play slot and I've seen him play outside. From the slot, deep post, accelerate through it, run. Kind of a guy had an angle on him, got him to the goal line, and he actually fumbled it at the 1-yard line out of bounds for a touchback. Got to protect that ball going in, right? There's another reception he had against Memphis. Fade. Got a big defensive back, was all over him. He went up high, pointed it, caught it in the crowd. That was impressive. Then there's a dig route as an outside receiver. Got loose, burst, 38 yards. Short area burst on this guy. Gets going quickly in short areas. That part of it reminds me of Herb Haygood a little bit. Kind of a Herb Haygood type of receiver. Put him out there with Marsh, and they're looking for 2 more. It's my understanding. This guy also had 9 catches for 239 yards and 3 touchdowns against Western Kentucky. Talking about Omari Keli. Also commitment today from Luka Vincic. Let me see if I've got a pronunciation on him. I think it's Vincic. Wait, here we go. Let me check it out. It is Vincic. Luka Vincic, 6'5", 303. Bothwell Washington was kind of a backup, kind of the sixth offensive lineman. Had a couple starts at Oregon State. So a guy that this staff has recruited before. 344 snaps this year, so about like played half the snaps this year for Oregon State. Graded out at 62 in run blocking, which is average in the PFF rankings. Redshirt sophomore, you'd think has his best football ahead of him. A guy that got on the field, played 10 games, 69 snaps against Oregon. I need to go back and watch that one. 46 snaps against Nevada, 55 against UNLV, 24 snaps against Cal. So Vincich, he is the first offensive line commitment. And it's my understanding they were looking to have 4 portal imports this year, and that's the first one, Vincich, a guy that they know really well from years gone by. Now he's following them out to Michigan State. Guard center. Michigan State needs help at center. And with Dylan Tatum having graduated, Vincich immediately becomes a candidate to be the starting center. There'll be others that they'll bring in. There'll be some competitions. I've not heard this, but I don't rule out Raheem Johnson possibly being a center. All kinds of athletic ability. Not the biggest frame, but he got on the field this year, played some right tackle, played some guard. They were impressed with his mental capacity to process as a true freshman, get on the field. And this is a guy that didn't even have spring practice. He came in August, and right away he was playing in September. Talking about Raheem Johnson. So if he has that kind of ability to process, I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes a center at some point. 6'3" is pretty good. It's good enough size for center. It's not ideal for outside. He made it work this year. But all kinds of quickness and athleticism. You combine that with the gray matter, snap and pull, gives you some things you can do on the outside. Raheem Johnson, something I look for in the spring. I'll have to ask some of the coaches if I get a chance during the offseason if they would look at that. Offensive line coach Jim Mahalchik often says they try everybody everywhere. And if you ask him who some of the starters are, he'll never let you know. And right up until the first game in late August, he won't let you know who's at each position and so forth. But Vincich is going to be right in the middle of it. Also, not a big surprise, but safety Justin Denson's going to be a sophomore next year. True freshman, played this year. Split time with Jalen Thompson at safety late in the season when Michigan State ran into injuries at the safety position. And Jalen Thompson went into the portal. Justin Denson announced that he's coming back. Kid from Pennsylvania, had originally committed to the Harlan Barnett, Mel Tucker regime. Michigan State held on to him last year. Played this year out of necessity due to injuries and so forth, but he announced on Twitter that he's coming back. I guess that's what you do these days. You announce you're coming back, and that's news. I don't mean to make it news here, but he mentioned about 24 hours ago that he was going to make an announcement on Sunday night, and then he made an announcement. He's coming back. So over at the Underground Bunker message board, a few Michigan State fans were like, yeah, cool, he's coming back. Other people are like, what are you talking about? Why is that news now? And other people are like, well, I don't know. It's kind of the way it is. And other people are like, what are you talking about? Get off the board. And other guy's like, why don't you get off the board? And then I step in like a recess attendant and I say, come on, guys, everybody settle down. It's going to be all right. Have some dip. It's going to be fine. So Denson, he's still in the fold. And I guess that's good. That's good news. They need some bodies. They need some people. Guys been on the field and might have a decent future. Might have a good future. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, let's get to the questions real quick. We got about, 11, 12 questions we're gonna go through. Over in the comments section, feel free to throw in some questions. As far as visitors this weekend, on December 12th, today's the 15th? That'd have been on Thursday, I guess. Christian McCray, redshirt sophomore wide receiver from Kent State, 5'10", 165, from Avon, Indiana. I've watched him a little bit. Reminds me of Silas Bolden a little bit. If you saw Silas Bolden for Oregon State last year, and then he transferred to Texas, this coaching staff, they like to have a little receiver like that running around. That's what McCray is there at Kent State. He visited earlier in the week Jalil Hurley, redshirt freshman corner from Alabama. He's also visiting Missouri and Kansas. He was in on Thursday. On Friday, TJ Harden, running back, junior, UCLA. He visited. We've got some stats about him. We'll get to that later. Omari Kelly visited and committed. He canceled his other visits after he did. Luka Vincich visited and committed. Also on Saturday, Connor Cox, tight end, sophomore, South Carolina, 6'6", 251. He's also visiting Kansas and North Carolina State. Now, interestingly about Connor Cox, if you go back and look at his recruiting information coming out of Jacksonville, Florida, there were a small handful of schools that offered him. One of the schools that did offer him was Minnesota. So I don't know if Joe Rossi was recruiting the Jacksonville, Florida area at that time. I don't know if he was involved in that, but he committed to South Carolina relatively early, but Minnesota was one of the schools that was in on him. So sometimes, like Andy Staples likes to say, you have to reconnect the dots to see who might be involved with transfers as they move along. So maybe that was an in there. We'll look deeper into that. Also today, Sunday, corner Joshua Eaton out of Texas State University, 6 feet 190. He's also visiting Texas San Antonio and Tulane. The Tulane visit is supposed to be December 21st if he goes ahead and does that. We'll talk with Jason a little bit more about some of those guys here real soon. Also, hey, I want to let you know, today I was over the Michigan State women's basketball game against Iowa at the Breslin Center. It looked like there's like 5,000 or 6,000. They're the best crowd of the year so far. Loud crowd. Iowa was up by 9 in the second half. Michigan State came back and won. Julia Ayrault, senior, Grosse Pointe basketball player. Excellent job on defense for her. A blocked shot and a contested shot in the last possession. Game high 19 points. Last year they had all kinds of injuries, and Julia, who's kind of a, I don't know, stretch. She's a guard, stretch 4. She's literally positionless. Good passer. Last year she had to play center because Michigan State had so many injuries at the center position. She had to guard centers. Didn't have to do that today, but at the end she blocked a shot on a driver and also got out on Lucy Olson, who averages 19 a game for Iowa. Big win. Michigan State's ranked number 17 in the country. Iowa number 22 in the country. It's the first time in 4 years that you had 2 ranked teams playing women's basketball at the Breslin Center. That made it a noteworthy event. Michigan State wins. They're 10-0, the best start in school history, I think it is. So they're playing well, pressing all over the place, forcing turnovers. Good, fun, exciting basketball today. I want to say also, Big Ten road is going to be tough for Michigan State. Right now, there's 8 teams from the Big Ten women's basketball that are in the top 25. UCLA's number 1 in the country. USC 5, Maryland 7, Ohio State 11. 4 Big Ten teams in the top 11. Michigan State does not get any of those 4 at home. They have to go to UCLA, at USC, at Maryland, at Ohio State. Michigan, they'll go home and home with them, of course. They're number 20 in the country, and Iowa number 21. So aside from Michigan, Iowa is the highest ranked current team that Michigan State will have at home, and that was a big win today. Michigan State 1-0 in the Big Ten. They'll resume Big Ten action in early January. It was good to be over there. They were playing hard, and it was entertaining. All right, leadoff question. Ernie from Colorado. He threw this one out there, and I think this is a good question for the masses, and I'll ask you to put in your thoughts over there in the comments area. Question is from Ernie: who are some of the most underrated Michigan State football players of all time? He asks, in the sense of people don't understand how important these players were to that team's success. Ernie offers Marcus Rush, defensive end, early in the D'Antonio era. He says Marcus Rush is one guy who does not get enough credit, he says. His consistency was a big reason why they could do what they did. That's a good one. I think Marcus Rush, I think I've mentioned this before. We had a statistic that we invented at Spartan Magazine called winning starts. Like, how many games did you start that Michigan State won? And after we closed that up, we had Marcus Rush with more winning starts than anyone in school history. He started, portions of 4 years, healthy, durable, never missed games due to injury, and he was around, I think, 2013, 12, 11, maybe 14. I don't know if he was on the 14 team or not, but he was on those winning teams, amassed a lot of starts. And, you could go back to the 60s, and there might have been guys that had better winning percentages as starters. But back when Michigan State was great in the 50s and 60s, freshmen were not eligible, so you're talking about a 3-season career. Secondly, they're only playing 9 games a season. So we didn't go back and look at those stats from back then, but mathematically, I don't know how anyone back then could have had as many winning starts as Rush did. Rush was in the high 30s, I think, 36, 38, 39 career winning starts, which was big time. Now you throw in the COVID year, somebody could have started 5 years, but Michigan State hasn't won enough games to encroach on what Rush was. So over there in the comments area, I look forward to hearing what some of you say, some of the names that come to mind for you all in terms of underrated players. I guess where you start is look at some of Michigan State's better teams and who are some players that were underrated that helped make those teams go. Thinking back to like the Rose Bowl team, the Perlis Rose Bowl team in '87. Like, some of those other offensive linemen. Manrich got a lot of notoriety, of course. Shermer did. Pat Shermer. Hool was an interesting offensive lineman. Linebacker Kurt Larson. Larson started on the team, right? So that'd be the epitome of underrated if you can't remember for sure if he started. I mean, Crum and Miller got a lot of attention. But I'm interested to see what some of you all say. All right, question number 2. Mullen Lobby from Gladwin, Michigan says, hey, Jim, what's your assessment of the portal departures? Are you excited about any specific offers that are out there to potential transfers? All right. Assessment of the portal departures. I think Michigan State has 13 guys that entered the portal. One by one, Charles Brantley's the big one, a guy that started portions of 4 seasons for Michigan State and was off to his best start in a season this year. Ended up becoming honorable mention All Big Ten. A guy that's had trouble staying healthy. He's never finished a season healthy. This year he tried to not hit so hard, to make business decisions to stay healthy, but he ended up missing the last 3 games. At least the last 3 games. But he was having a good season. He's a good corner. But this is the 3rd time he's in the portal. And it's my understanding that when he entered the portal, it kind of surprised the Michigan State coaches. It's my understanding that they thought he was going to be coming back and they were going to be talking about, NIL deals and things like that. And then he enters the portal. And this day and age, for Michigan State, where they are as a program right now, someone at Michigan State can contact me and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's my understanding based on this one that once he went into the portal, Michigan State just kind of shut the door. Like, you told us you were in, So nothing against him, but if you're Jonathan Smith and you're trying to establish a program, what can you do to kind of deter people from always, checking the water in the portal? Either you're going to the portal and you want to leave, or you're staying. But you can't have people, if you're trying to build a program, like just trying to test the waters. Well, let's go to the market and see what I'm worth, but I might go back. No, if you want to run an accountable disciplined program, hey, if you step a foot to test the waters, you're gone, the door's closed, we're breaking your plate, you're done. That's a deterrent. If somebody's like getting some advice from an agent that they might want to go test the waters or they're 50-50, hey, there's no on the fence. If you're on the fence, you're gone. That's what you'd like to do if you've got enough strength as a program. Is Michigan State there yet? Maybe they showed that with Brantley. I don't know. Now, like Bobby Bowden used to say, he's got one set of rules for his kickers from Europe and one set of rules from his players from the States. That's when what was the guy's name? Sebastian Janikowski. Every time he got in trouble, Bobby Bowden just kind of quipped, well, I got a different set of rules for my players from overseas. Bobby Bowden, all the writers there thought that was hilarious. But maybe you've got different set of rules if you've got, if this is 1986 and the portal had been in place and Lorenzo White tests the waters, maybe you let him do it and then you pull out the money and you go get Lorenzo White. Maybe there's a different set of rules for a guy like Lorenzo White. But this day and age, as Michigan State's trying to get it established.
Call from
Jason Killip.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail.
All right, we're going to bring in Jason Killip here in a moment. We are on the air, but let me finish my thought. This day and age, if you've got someone, as you're trying to establish a program, and someone steps a foot into the portal, maybe Brantley's the type of guy where you send a message to the rest of the program, you step a foot in, that's it. I don't know for a fact 100% that was the case here, but I've heard some things, seen some smoke, and that seems to be the indication. Don't look for Brantley to be coming back to Michigan State. Now, last year he was in the portal, and there were some other players that were in the portal at Michigan State as a new staff tried to fish out of the portal, different circumstances. But now Brantley, a good player, but Michigan State looking to move on is my understanding. And by the way, that shouldn't come as a big surprise if you look up his name over the Michigan State official website on the roster, and you click on his name, his bio no longer exists. And that's kind of a sign of that they have moved on. Let's bring in Jason Killip, recruiting anchor for SpartanMag.com. Does a great job covering recruiting, great job covering the transfer portal. When we hear that players have entered the portal from Michigan State, Jake Laskawa also does a real good job with those articles, and Kenny Jordan doing a good job helping us as well. Jason Killip, very valuable, doing a good job getting a hold of some of these recruits that are in the portal that are visiting Michigan State, writing stories about them. And it's difficult to cover right now because, like I said earlier, some players are available, some are not. Some of these recruitments zigzag and change with the wind, unlike anything in high school recruiting. So the transfer portal recruiting is a little bit different every year, and this one is beginning to take on a personality of its own, and we're covering it over to SpartanMag.com. Become a subscriber over there. We'd love to have you as we continue to cover that. So, Jason, how you doing, man? You doing okay?
Doing good. I'm good. How about you?
Not bad. So I was just talking a moment ago about Michigan State's commitment earlier today from Omari Keli, wide receiver from Trussville, Alabama, Middle Tennessee State, 53 catches this year, first team all-conference and Conference USA. Omari Keli, your thoughts about him? Have you had a chance to get a hold of him yet? What are some of the ripple effect going on right now with Michigan State getting what I would call a noteworthy commitment from a transfer portal wide receiver?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely a big way to get on the board for Michigan State this afternoon, and obviously a position of need, as we've discussed at SpartanMag quite a bit, the need for wide receivers in this cycle. And they hosted Miami, Ohio transfer portal wide receiver Reggie Virgil last week, who ended up committing to Texas Tech, and they were slated to host another Miami, Ohio receiver. I'm blanking on the name right now. Javon Tracy was his name, and he canceled his visit to Michigan State. So around that time, there was some worry about who's Michigan State going to get at wide receiver. Are they going to be able to get any of their top targets? And Keli, as far as I know, was right up there as far as one of their top guys on their board, and one of the guys that they made a priority to get on an official visit early on. And landing him, I think, was a big get for Michigan State. Good way to kick things off in the portal and ease some nerves a little bit. They'll still be in the market for another wide receiver or two, like I heard you mention earlier. But getting him in the room definitely helps ease some nerves a little bit as we get going more into the portal.
All right, Jason, you've got your ear to the ground pretty well on what's going on with the portal. You mentioned something earlier tonight. As we look around the country in the Big Ten, Minnesota Golden Gophers, they've been pretty busy in the portal. What are you detecting with Minnesota right now?
Yeah, Minnesota has had a lot of momentum in the portal so far. They picked up 3 running backs tonight, which is interesting. They already have a very good standout running back in Darius Taylor, as a lot of people in the state of Michigan are aware of, out of Walled Lake Western, I believe. But Minnesota has been hot in the transfer portal. They also landed the wide receiver Tracy that I mentioned a few minutes ago from Miami, Ohio, and they definitely one of those schools that is bought into this transfer portal cycle and making sure to bring in some impact guys. Michigan State hopes to get more guys in their class and put up a class similar. Right now, with just 2 members in their portal class, they're hoping to have a big class as well. Minnesota was able to strike on a lot of their guys on their first visits and first or second visits, and Michigan State will hope to do the same on guys this week upcoming.
All right, I want to ask you about some people that have visited Michigan State this weekend. And over at the SpartanMag Underground Bunker message board, got the portal tracker that gives you all the information about players that have visited and some that have received Michigan State offers that we know about publicly. There's going to be other players that are visiting where the information won't come out. Like last year, all of a sudden, Jalen Satchel commits to Michigan State. We didn't know that Michigan State was involved. Nakai Martinez commits to Michigan State. We didn't know Michigan State was involved. There's some others. Daquan Dowse, I think we didn't know about him, but it'll probably be that way also. There will be players that commit that we hadn't detected or gotten information that they had been visiting. So that's going to be part of this as well. As soon as the portal opened, we had heard that Michigan State was involved with Caleb Carter, redshirt junior offensive lineman from Western Carolina, 6'3", 310, from Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville, North Carolina, maybe not Jacksonville, Florida. But anyway, played for a team that came in second place in the Southern Conference this year, and he visited Michigan State December 9th. Has there been any more information from Caleb Carter? Has he been difficult to get a hold of? How are things going on there? What's any news to report with him?
I've had some limited contact with Caleb Carter, and he let me know that after his Michigan State visit wrapped up, he would be heading to Wake Forest in Arizona. I believe his Arizona visit wrapped up on Saturday, so Those were the only visits that he told me of at the time, unless he's planned some more. Those were his biggest offers outside of Michigan State as well. And I could see him possibly coming to a decision shortly after those 3 visits. It seemed to me as if those were his 3 finalists at the time. Things in the portal change very often. If another school had started to reach out, he might add another visit to his schedule. He hadn't told me anything about making a decision. But with Michigan State adding Luka Vincic to this afternoon, Caleb Carter could be a guy that has to make a decision soon to have a spot. We know he's a guy Michigan State liked a lot early on when the portal first opened, but Vincic was not in the portal at that time. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. We know Michigan State wants to add multiple offensive linemen, and we'll have to see how they feel about some of the other offensive line targets that also visited and what they think of Carter and where he stacks up on their board.
So Carter is from Jacksonville, North Carolina. He's also visiting Wake Forest, an in-state school that I'm guessing may have been involved with him when he went to Western Carolina. They probably had an eye on him, and then he goes to Western Carolina, develops, Wake Forest gets back in on it. So he's got a home state option, and then he goes out west to a sunshine option like Arizona. It's a North Carolina guy that visited Michigan State last week when it was about 20 degrees out. So now we're getting back to the way recruiting used to be in the month of December, when playing the weather can be it used to be a big part of recruiting in January, back when February was the only signing day, and most of the visits took place in early December or in January, when guys like Cedric Irvin and Gary Scott and some of those Floridians would come up and visit in the middle of winter. It was hard to reel them in. Michigan State reeled some of those in, but I suspect, this guy he's going to really have to love Michigan State, or Michigan State's going to he's going to really have to love the Michigan State coaches, which is part of recruiting, if all the NIL things are equal. I'm just a hunch on that. Did he say anything about the weather? Did you talk to him very much?
No, I didn't. I wasn't able to get into that. I was hoping to, but he was headed straight to Wake Forest from Michigan State, and we didn't have time to get an article done or to get any more quotes than just his next visits at the time.
Yeah. So, and I understand it. NIL is a big part of a lot of these recruitments, but in many of them, some of these schools are looking to match what's out there. So if a player has the same NIL deals at 3 different schools, then it comes down to old-fashioned recruiting. Do you like the campus? Do you like the coaches? Those type of things. Now, the NIL things, these are offers. These are, you hear a lot of blindsman bluff going on out there, accusations. Like some schools think, School X, Minnesota State, they're offering, Hayden Fox and those guys, they're offering all kinds of money they don't have, and the kids are believing it, and they're going there. So we're offering this much, and it's for real, but this guy sees this, and then they end up not getting that money once they're there. So that part of football recruiting and football reality, that's a story that's not been written yet in terms of players signing at a school, and then you go there, and then you don't end up getting what you were supposed to get. These things are not transparent. They're not public. Some sort of contracts are signed in a lot of ways. Sometimes the school can get out of those contracts. We've seen that at Michigan State. Can players get out of the contracts? What kind of binding contracts are these? A lot of these things haven't hit the courts yet. So there's a lot of blindsman bluff out there. I thought Michigan State last year, I've said it a number of times, did really well in the transfer portal, getting a lot of what I call solid value guys that they probably didn't have to break the bank to get some of those guys. Nikai Martinez, Jalen Satchel, Wayne Matthews, and several others, Daquan Dowse. I thought they did pretty well. And they're going to have to do it again to replenish this roster. Sticking with the offensive line, Caleb Carter from Western Carolina. As far as other offers, it's John Thompson, a kid from Fenton, Michigan, who went to Northwestern, and an established Big Ten starting offensive lineman, which makes him immediately attractive in the portal chase. Gets offers from Michigan, Auburn, Ohio State, LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina, Michigan State. He visited Michigan State, I think, a few days ago. Luke Baklenko from Stanford, true sophomore, became a starter this year at Stanford, Oklahoma, Illinois, Auburn, some of those schools that are in on him. I don't know if Michigan State offered Derek Simmons. That was the teammate of Caleb Carter's over there at Western Carolina. Derek Simmons was, I think, first team all Southern Conference, but I don't know if Michigan State's in on him. But Luka Vincic, they got a commitment from him today. Khalil Tafai from Washington. Carter Miller from Louisiana Monroe, but he committed to Colorado. Those are some of the offers we heard about at the offensive line position. Jason Killip, any of those offensive linemen that I just mentioned, anything brewing with any of them or anything? And is there a latest on any of those guys? If you were to pick one of those guys to talk about a little bit, what's going on?
Yeah, well, real quick, just a note on Derek Simmons. You mentioned he's a teammate of Caleb Carter at Western Carolina. He eliminated Michigan State, so he's a guy that they offered, but it does not look like they were going to be able to get him to campus. Then you mentioned Josh Thompson of Northwestern. He's another guy that they look at as a guy who could come in and compete for a job right away and really impact offensive linemen. And he visited Ohio State this past weekend. He'll have plenty more visits to go, and it seems like he's pretty open in his recruitment process. It's going to be hard to get a read on which way he's leaning until his visits wrap up, and there'll be some high-profile visits and some high-profile offers for him. And then you mentioned Luke Polenko of Stanford. Same kind of similar with him. He visited Michigan State last week and visited Auburn and Oklahoma. There's been some chatter that the Oklahoma visit went really well and that he could commit to Oklahoma in the coming days. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. And if Michigan State keeps continuing to expand their offensive line board after that. So Thompson's still on the board, and so is Khalil Tafai from Washington. It's been quiet there to learn if Michigan State's going to be able to secure a visit with him, or he could be one of those guys that just pops up on campus and we didn't know he was coming type of thing. But that's a guy that I believe that Michigan State coaches had a relationship with back when their time with Oregon State before he committed to Washington. So they'll be trying to push for a visit there as well.
All right, so Luke Beklenko is a guy that caught my eye, sophomore from Stanford. Played a little bit as a true freshman last year. This year became a starter. And I've looked at some of his Stanford film just briefly, but I went back and looked at his high school film. And from Thousand Oaks, California, Oaks Christian High School. Type of guy that I would say in high school, that guy looked like a 4-star to me. And if you'd have told me this guy's going to play right away as a true freshman in the Pac-12, I'd be like, yeah, I believe it. But he was like ranked number 100 and something in the state of California. Underrated. Type of guy that they ran a lot of wham blocks at Oaks Christian. He'd pull, and you'd see him pull, drive, knock a guy on his butt, and help him up. Knock a guy on his butt, help him up, which I appreciate. And kind of a Stanford thing to do, and goes into the portal. Oklahoma, Auburn. In the SEC, they passed the hat pretty strongly down there. And last year we saw Oklahoma overspend for Spencer Brown, taking him from Michigan State. And nothing against Spencer Brown, but I doubt they got their money's worth. Oklahoma, I'm not sure, but the money's going to be flowing, and it is at Auburn also. And Hugh Freeze needs to win next year at Auburn. And there's no teams that spend more money in the portal than someone who's on the hot seat. So Michigan State might like Beklenko, and I can see why. But like you said, there's some indications from insiders down in Norman, Oklahoma. They think he's going to be a Sooner. And like I said, they will spend money, sometimes wisely, sometimes unwisely. I think this one would be wise spending. I suspect also that when Michigan State goes through the portal and their how much money they can spend on certain players and how many resources they could allocate to players, I suspect Beklenko was probably a high expenditure guy. Whether or not that's more than Oklahoma's going to be offering. And Auburn, I could see where that one could be a difficult one for Michigan State, but good for Michigan State to get in on him. And he did visit. Did we hear that Beklenko did visit Michigan State yet? December 10th.
Yep, he did.
Well, who knows? Maybe he loved it. So he's not been doing any interviews that I know of. So these things stay quiet. It stays under the radar. You said he was at Oklahoma today? Did you say? Or
yeah, I think yesterday. Yeah.
All right. So stay tuned. SpartanMag.com to see what happens there. Also this weekend, any of those other offensive linemen that you want to mention, or are there any other ones cropping up?
No, but there could be some more guys to keep an eye on as the Division II playoffs finish and wrap up. I'm not sure exactly when those dates exactly are, but there's several schools still involved in there that have some players that I've seen floated around on list of guys to watch entering the transfer portal. I don't know if Michigan State will for sure be involved with anybody like that or not, but there could be guys that could pop up on the radar in a couple weeks here still that are still playing as well, especially also in the college football playoffs as well. But yeah, the portal still, players are still entering, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Michigan State send some new offensive line offers out as well if they start to see things trending in the opposite directions with those guys we mentioned.
And then players that play in bowl games and then want to enter the portal afterward, they can't do it until the spring, right? I'm not real clear on when the portal window ends. It opened on December 9th. Go ahead.
December 29th, I believe it closes. So yeah, they'd have to be in by the end of that portal window.
December 29th, that's a strange date because there's going to be a lot of people that are still playing in bowl games that might want to play in their bowl game right now, but might want to make their decision after a bowl game, and they're just kind of have to wait to the spring, I guess. That doesn't make any sense, does it?
No, it seems like it should open on January 1st, in my opinion, but yeah, this is the way they have it for now. It says, I just looked it up real quick just to be sure, Monday, December 9th through December 28th is when it closes.
All right. Some of these lower tier bowl games will be wrapping up in and around Christmas, so maybe some more will be entering. And quite frankly, I expected a few more commitments from Michigan State by now, just because I know there was a lot of initial interest in Michigan State from other players out there, and they got some visits. Two commitments, solid start in my opinion. Wide receiver and an offensive lineman who could grow into something solid and dependable here in the long-term future, if not the near future. I think they're off to a good start with those two. Maybe I'm just maybe I don't have a clear idea of what the portal is all about this year. I don't know what other schools are getting in terms of commitments right now, in terms of numbers of commitments. You mentioned Minnesota. Have you detected any other teams that have more than 5 or 6 commitments right now out of the portal?
I don't know exactly full numbers, but I've noticed there has been definitely certain programs that have had some spurts where I think that they went into certain weekends with a plan and some money to spend, and made sure that they closed on some guys like Texas Tech. They closed on 3 or 4 guys over the weekend this weekend. So I've noticed some bursts of commitments for 2 different programs, but I couldn't tell you exactly how many programs have had that. I think usually in those cases, it's usually some spending going on to close up, to get guys to close down before their other visits, because most guys want to keep going and checking out other places. So if they get offered enough, they'll shut things down, but it just depends on situations, I think, for a lot. And some schools were ready to close down their first group of visitors and were successful with that.
All right, you mentioned Texas Tech has a few. And Texas Tech also had 1 or 2 that Michigan State was either had a visit from or was trying to get a visit from. You mentioned the wide receiver Virgil was one of them. Was there more than one that Texas Tech defeated Michigan State for?
Cornerback Bryce Pollock also visited Michigan State and then committed to Texas Tech over the weekend. Defensive lineman, he did not visit. I'm going to have to find his name real quick. I guess he might not have had an offer, but one of the defensive linemen Michigan State were after also committed to Texas Tech. While I look for his name. So there was 3 guys. 2 of them had visited, and one of them was just a guy that Michigan State was trying to get to campus. Bryce Pollock and Reggie Virgil were the 2 main guys, targets that Michigan State hosted that went there.
And where was Reggie Virgil from?
Miami, Ohio, and then Pollock was from Mississippi State.
Right. And Pollock was originally from Snellville, Georgia, and he's heading to Texas Tech. Reggie Virgil was originally from Apopka, Florida, although he played a couple years of college football at Miami of Ohio. 6'4", bigger wide receiver. He's going to Texas Tech also. So a MAC guy from Florida, Michigan State goes after him, ends up at Texas Tech. So Texas Tech's out there busy in the portal. Michigan State coming up short on those 2. This weekend, today, Joshua Eaton, corner, Texas State, 6 feet, 190. He visited Michigan State. He's also looking at Texas San Antonio and Tulane. Tulane's been a very good program in recent years. This might be one of those value guys Michigan State can get in on and get some good football out of. And you hearing anything about Joshua Eaton? What are some of your early indications with Joshua Eaton?
Yeah, I think Joshua Eaton is a guy Michigan State has a chance to close on this weekend while he's on campus. I know I talked to him just a little bit before the visit, and he told me he didn't have relationships with the Michigan State coaches or Blue Adams in the past, but he's looking forward to getting on campus. And you mentioned his other 2 visits. I think if he's a guy Michigan State values to push hard for this weekend, that they have a strong chance on closing him down and stopping him from taking those other visits. But he did post an offer from Illinois, Oregon State, and Temple. Some of the other offers that he's posted that he did not mention visits for yet. But if Illinois were to push for a visit, maybe he'd want to check them out. But I could see Michigan State, if he's a guy that they prioritize over the visit this weekend. His visit wraps up tomorrow. I could see movement coming early next week if that's a guy that they really want and push forward this weekend.
Michigan State did a good job in the portal last year with Ed Woods. I thought he had a good workman-like season for Michigan State. He's done now. Michigan State last year also had commitments to the corner position out of the portal from Jeremiah Hughes out of LSU and Legend Cavazos out of North Carolina by way of Ohio State. Well, Ohio State by way of North Carolina. Cavazos really didn't get on the field, battled some injuries. Hughes was just getting on the field when he was lost for the season, late in the season. He was just getting on the field due to injuries to other guys. Played a little bit, jumped ahead of Ade Willie in one of the games, and I thought that he was better than Ade Willie, but then they both were injured for the following game. Or actually, I think Willie came back. Anyway, Ed Woods looked good. Now Demetrius Martin had a lot to do with those. Demetrius Martin no longer with Michigan State. So Michigan State needs help at corners, and they're operating without Demetrius Martin. So Michigan State has some things to prove there. Blue Adams, defensive backs coach from Oregon State in his second year at Michigan State. Now, will he oversee the entire secondary? That remains to be seen what Michigan State's going to do with the assistant coaching vacancy, but Michigan State needs to match what they did last year with Ed Woods, maybe with more than one. Joshua Eaton is an interesting one, coming from a low major type of situation. Had 19 solo tackles, 8 assists last year at Texas State. Had 1 sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, had 5 pass breakups, 1 quarterback hit. Graded out similarly in terms of Pro Football Focus, graded out in the neighborhood between Ed Woods and Malik Spencer in terms of overall defensive grade. In terms of tackling, he graded out between Charles Brantley and Cal Halliday to give you a familiarity, a comparison of familiarity. If I say that he graded out a 55.6, people don't really know what that means. You might get more familiar with it. 16 above is average and above. But if I compare these numbers to Michigan State players you're familiar with, then these rankings might mean a little bit more to you. And I don't believe that Pro Football Focus rankings are the end-all, be-all, and coaches don't either. But it's at least a metric that's worth taking a look at. Eaton also in pass defense graded out between Jalen Thompson and Malik Spencer. So not against the same competition these guys were facing, but that's kind of where he graded out. It's going to be an upperclassman, a senior. Ed Woods, I thought, came into Michigan State and played better than he showed at Arizona State. I thought Nakai Martinez came in and played better than he showed at Central Florida. I watched one game after he committed, Nakai Martinez, and it was against Oklahoma when Dylan Gabriel was there. And I thought Nakai Martinez last year was a true sophomore. At Central Florida, had some bad habits. He eased up on tackles and was just kind of casual. And I was like, man, he's going to have to change that if he wants to play in the Big Ten at Michigan State. And he did. A lot of times players get better between their sophomore and their junior year. And Nakai Martinez was better than he showed as a sophomore and better than I expected him to be. And the coaches did a good job getting him to get more out of his potential than he got at Central Florida, in my opinion. So Ed Woods took it up a level. Nakai Martinez took it up a level. If someone like Joshua Eaton commits to Michigan State, it'll be interesting to see if he takes it up a level from there. He's a solid, proven starting corner at a lower level. Corners are an attractive and important commodity in college football. So Michigan State's in on Joshua Eaton. We'll see what happens coming out of this weekend. Connor Cox, sophomore tight end, University of South Carolina, 6'6", 251. Talked about him earlier. I found it interesting that Minnesota had offered him a couple of years ago. I don't know if Joe Rossi was responsible for recruiting the Jacksonville area, Northeast Florida. But interesting that Minnesota was one of the few schools to offer Connor Cox before he committed to the Gamecocks. He's also visiting Kansas and North Carolina State. Not somebody who's gotten a lot of production thus far. Spent 1 year in South Carolina. I think he played one game, handful of snaps, goes into the portal. Michigan State, for whatever reason, interested in this 6'6", 251-pound tight end. I've not looked at any of his film or anything, but he visited yesterday. Any thoughts on Connor Cox? You hearing anything? Any rumblings going on?
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm intrigued to see how his visit goes and what he plans to do after it. I should be able to get in contact with him, and he told me about his NC State and Kansas State visits. Those are supposed to be midweek this next week. Then those are the 3 offers that he's posted publicly on his social media account. And that's one thing I've noticed in the transfer portal cycle is not every player posts every offer, which is something that's interesting. Some guys will post a handful of offers and then stop posting the rest, or only post a few. And I've seen some guys post and delete some and things like that. So the offers being reported on Twitter for the transfer portal this cycle has been a little interesting. Those are the only 3 that he's reported, and he set up visits to all 3. He's a guy that I think Michigan State, it was one of those value type of targets. I don't think they'll be breaking the bank to host and target Connor Cox. And if he's a guy that they prioritize over the weekend, then he could be another guy like Eaton that they could possibly wrap up this week, or after those visits to Kansas and NC State, we could see a quick decision between the 3 schools, I think.
Connor Cox, did you say he's visiting Kansas or Kansas State? I thought it was Kansas, but are you still there?
Yep.
All right. Do you know if Connor Cox, was it Kansas or Kansas State that he's visiting?
Kansas and NC State.
Okay.
I might have mixed that up.
No problem. Also, got a question here from Matt Dorsey, a longtime recruiting reporter for Michigan State and still an astute observer. And I texted him earlier, asked him to come on the show if he wanted to. We'll have Matt on here. I texted him a couple days ago also. I wanted him to go through some of on signing day, some of the incoming recruits, just to see if he had some thoughts on any of those. And we'll get Matt on here real soon. Great guy, good friend of mine. And love to hear from him. He has a question over here in the comments area. He says, any word about the running back that visited by the name of Eli Sanders from New Mexico? I know he had offers from Arizona, Oklahoma State, Arkansas, Virginia Tech, and a few others. Productive running back in New Mexico. Any word, any new developments with Eli Sanders, running back?
Yeah, so Sanders told me he was so he took his visits to Michigan State, Arizona, Arkansas, and Virginia Tech in that order. Virginia Tech being the last visit that wrapped up on Saturday. And he was telling me that he had planned to make a decision today, which obviously did not come yet, between those 4 schools. Personally, going into, if he made his decision today, I was thinking it would either be Arizona or Arkansas. I didn't get a good vibe that it would be Michigan State from talking with him about it, but he's from Arizona, so that would be the hometown school, and he seemed to be pretty excited about the Arkansas visit as well, just from his reactions down there. And Michigan State hosted Tamarian Harden from UCLA over the weekend, so those 2 guys seem to be 2 of the top running back targets right now. With Sanders not making his decision today, it gives more time for Michigan State to make up some ground there, where I think that they might need to make up some ground if that's their top priority there. And it'll be interesting to see if he's adding more visits to his schedule, or if he'll be making a decision soon between those 4 finalists like he had originally planned. So I'll have my ear to the ground there and try to provide updates as soon as I can with his recruitment and what his next steps are. But I would watch Arizona or Arkansas right now, in my opinion, for him.
All right, so running back, a critical area of need for Michigan State in the portal last year. Did pretty well getting K'Ron Lynch-Adams. He was productive. The year before that, Nate Carter, productive running back. Neither one of them maybe great ones, although Nate Carter played like a great football player against Michigan this year. Prior to that, Jarek Broussard did not quite pan out. Michigan State in the Mel Tucker era paid a lot of money for Jarek Broussard and did not pan out. Of course, the year before that, Kenneth Walker with the legendary single-season performance at Michigan State. I'm not saying you'll find Kenneth Walker every year, but something along the lines of Lynch-Adams and Carter, they could use that as they try to recruit other running backs and build from within in addition to hitting the portal 4 players. So keep an eye on that. Michigan State, the running back you mentioned, Tamarian Hardin out of UCLA, 6'2", 220, more of a big back than Michigan State's had in recent years. Prior to that, Jalen Berger was kind of a big back that was hot and cold, and he ended up going out to UCLA last year, and he didn't play a whole lot out there. But this year, Tamarian Hardy, 506 yards rushing, 4.1 per carry, 2 touchdowns. His productivity fell off a little bit from 2023 when he rushed for 827 yards. Did Tamarian Hardin, 5.3 yards per carry as a sophomore in 2023. As a freshman in 2022, 325 yards rushing on limited carries, 7.4 yards per carry as a freshman. So Hardin is a guy that really hit the ground running, literally, at UCLA. This past season, not as productive. Now he's in the portal and visited Michigan State this weekend. Has he done any interviews, or is his situation kind of quiet?
No, he's been pretty quiet about everything. He let me know his visit ended on Saturday evening, and I was hoping to find out more information on if he has more visit plans, but I haven't been able to figure that out yet. He's kept things pretty tight and close to the vest as far as his recruitment goes.
Krishan McCray, wide receiver, Kent State. Anything new with him?
He's another one who's kept his recruitment very close to the vest. He didn't even advertise his Michigan State visit much. I was able to confirm with him that he was coming, and he hasn't released any more visit plans. And since his visit with Michigan State wrapped up Friday afternoon, so there hasn't been word as far as a decision plan or decision timeline or any more visits planned for him as well. But he's one to keep an eye on. I think the visit went well with him. I'm pretty positive, but other than that, he hasn't really provided much more updates or clarity on what's next for him. I would assume he has more visits. He posted a good amount of solid Power 5 offers when he first entered the portal, so there's definitely interest in his recruitment going forward.
5'10", 165 from Avon, Indiana. So it's a Midwestern kid. Reminds me of Silas Bolden a little bit, the little receiver they had out at Oregon State. As far as other wide receivers go, Omega Blake out of Charlotte, DT Sheffield out of North Texas, guys that you have posted over there at the portal tracker at the Underground Bunker message board. Anything new on those guys? Or are they pretty quiet also?
I've been able to get in touch with DT Sheffield. He told me that he won't be taking a visit to Michigan State, so he did mention some visit plans that I can look up real quick. Rutgers was one of them that I know for sure of. And then Omega Blake, similar thing. I haven't been able to get in contact with him myself, but one of the national writers at On3 had an update, and he'll be visiting Ole Miss, Arkansas, and Florida State, I believe were the 3 schools, but Michigan State wasn't mentioned as one of them for him as well.
All right, editorial meeting here. So when a player eliminates Michigan State, over there, the portal tracker, when you get a chance, if you don't or I don't or Kenny doesn't, go in there and mention eliminated Michigan State, or we should delete them altogether. What do you think we should do, Jason? Should we just delete them or put eliminated Michigan State and move them to the bottom of the list of that position group? You know what I mean?
Yeah, let's. I say in the way the portal is right now, nobody's ever safe to be fully removed. We could put eliminated and move them down to the bottom, but even though some of these eliminated guys could always pop back up on our radar for all we know, these things seem to change really fast and constant movement.
You mentioned that in a text with me, you didn't mention the player, but you've heard about a player or two that have mentioned these are my last 5. These are who I'm visiting, and that was all ready to be reported. And then what happened?
Yeah, within 24 hours, there was a new graphic made with 5 new schools on it. So things totally took a turn in that recruitment. He ended up, that was Javon Tracy, the wide receiver from Miami, Ohio, who ended up committing to Minnesota this evening. So he ended up not taking any of those visits, I don't think, besides one of them anyways, at the end of the day, I don't think.
Some of these players are straight out bidding wars, right? And some are not. Some are more, it's a combination of money and old-fashioned recruiting. And something like that had the earmarks of a bidding war. Would you agree?
Yeah, for sure. And I think the ones that they're out there, and the ones that are looking for playing time and stuff like that, then Michigan State is a very attractive option for a lot of position groups. And they think Michigan State's just trying to find the balance of the guys that are looking for a little bit of a balance.
Yeah, in the future, I don't think Michigan State wants to bring in 20 guys from the portal every single year, but they've just had to do that, had to flip the roster last year, have to flip it again this year. As they get established, they don't want that to be the case, although the transfer portal is going to be something that every team at all levels is going to have to use as one of the tent poles of of putting a roster together. And Minnesota looks like they're coming to the table with a lot of chips on a few players. So good on them. We'll see how good their evaluation is. Hey, it's a good program. They've done well over the years. At defensive tackle, very hard to find defensive tackles. Very, very valuable for any football team, for any defense, for any roster. And they can probably attract some nice compensation out there. David Blay, Louisiana Tech, in the portal. You mentioned him, Michigan State offered. David Oakey from Abilene Christian. And Hosea Wheeler, Western Kentucky. Some of these late bloomer types at smaller schools showing a lot of wares as defensive tackles. Any indications from those guys or any other defensive tackles at this point sniffing around Michigan State?
Yeah, one guy that we need to add to that list right now, defensive lineman Grady Keli. He started his career at Colorado State and then transferred to Florida State for this past season. Michigan State looked into him last cycle as he was one of the hotter names in the defensive tackle market last cycle. He committed to Florida State, and he didn't have the most productive year. He had a solid year, but more as a rotational backup guy for Florida State, and he entered the portal again for another round with 1 year of eligibility left. And he let me know today that he finalized his visit plans to visit Michigan State tomorrow. Right now, that's the only visit he has planned, and he's not one that has advertised offers on his profile. With him taking an official visit to Michigan State tomorrow, I would assume that he has a Michigan State offer, and that's something that I'll have to go back and confirm real quick when we get off this phone call. But he'll be on campus tomorrow, and he'll be an interesting name to watch. As you mentioned, defensive tackles are hard to come by, and he's a guy with Power 5 experience, and he was a all-conference player for Colorado State 2 seasons ago. So he has a good background, and a guy that with some production in his history, a guy that could come in with Michigan State and compete for a nice depth role.
Mm-hmm. Jalen Satchel, Daquan Dowse, Michigan State did a good job with him, and Ben Simmons out of Oregon. Michigan State did a solid job, really good job in the defensive tackle room last year in the portal. There's a short supply of defensive tackles on earth, and that makes defensive tackles in high demand. So look forward to see what you hear about that particular defensive tackles and others moving forward. Before I let you go, corners, Jaleel Hurley, he committed to Kansas, visitor from Alabama. Rayon Strader, Miami of Ohio, and Jeffrey Ugochukwu from Vanderbilt. Anything new about those two or any other defensive backs breaking right now as we move forward?
Yeah, so Rayon Strader is a guy that I'm very interested to see what happens with his recruitment in Michigan State. He's had a great seasons with Miami, Ohio, and entered the portal this offseason. Michigan State offered. His recruitment's been kept pretty quiet, and he's picked up some pretty big-time offers from around the country. So he's been busy. It hasn't been reported for him taking any visits so far. So if he's taken any visits, they've been kept pretty under the radar from what I've been aware of. But yeah, he's a strong option out there. And then you mentioned Jeffrey Ukuchu from Vanderbilt. He doesn't have anything set up as of now, but he told me he's hoping to finalize a visit with Michigan State for this upcoming week. So he could be a guy coming to campus soon. And then they also offered Dante Joyner, Arkansas State cornerback or safety, that we'll need to add to the big board here. He is one of the top-ranked safeties in the portal, number 4 safety, number 51 overall prospect. He logged 33 tackles, 2 interceptions, and 7 pass deflections as a sophomore in 2024. One of his interceptions came against Michigan. So the former Arkansas State defensive back Dante Joyner is a name to keep an eye on going forward. He's got a busy recruitment with offers from West Virginia, Maryland, Georgia Tech, Houston, and some others. So he'll be a guy to keep an eye on, and see if Michigan State can set up a visit with him in the next couple weeks.
All right, sounds good. Hey, Jason, I'll let you go. I know you're busy and you've got more work to do tonight. Really appreciate the hard work you're doing. All Michigan State fans all over the country appreciate the hard work you're doing. Thanks for taking time out to join Spartan Mag Live tonight, and I'll be talking to you soon. All right, Jason, thanks a lot. Great job.
Thanks, Jim.
There you go. Thanks a lot, Jason. It's good to have him on the show. There you go. He's covering the recruiting portal, the transfer portal, and it's changing all the time. Go to SpartanMag.com. Coverage throughout the week, throughout the month, head into the off season, into the winter conditioning, into spring practice. SpartanMag.com is your place for wall-to-wall coverage. Let's go over here to the comments area, see what's going on. John Elke checking in from Clarkston, Michigan. Noah Vanlin, how's going? Comp checking in from Diamonddale, Michigan. Daniel Berry, Sports Highlights, says hello. Desert Sparty says, hey, Comp. X Buckets for Life, Omari Kelly is a huge addition for next season. He says, we all appreciate how much you post and go live. Thanks. Appreciate that. Buckets for Life. Want to keep doing this more. Keep them shorter and doing more of them. Possible we could do that. We've got some leftover questions. Brad Fishenko checking in from Austin, Texas. Good to hear from Brad. Snyder Philip Stan checking in from Alexandria, Virginia. I like the way that sounds. John Elke says, going to LCA on Tuesday. Looking forward to watching the basketball team live. So Michigan State's playing Oakland University. I think it's 7:30 p.m. Little Caesars Arena. Michigan State playing pretty good basketball this year. Getting better all the time. I saw Izzo today at the women's basketball game. He says, man, the Spartans are practicing really well. Downtime right now, not many games being played right now, and they could have shoehorned another game in here, but they kind of gave themselves a little more off time coming out of finals, going into the Oakland game, and they're playing well. I don't mind reporting that Kerr Tang is practicing well. Josh McCulloch, who's redshirting as a big man, practicing well, and he's got a really nice future. Michigan State's really excited about him, not only as a player, but his personality, his attitude. Both of those guys looking pretty good for the future. So Tuesday night, Oakland University. Oakland not quite as good as they've been in years past. Let's see, they've lost to Boise State, Kansas. I think they lost to Youngstown State also. And, last year, of course, Michigan State defeated Oakland. Not entirely easy with the way they play that amoeba zone defense. Then they went out and scored a huge upset over Kentucky in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Became everybody's darling, Oakland University. So Grizzlies, Spartans, Detroit, Tuesday night. I'll be there. Konadike will be there. I think Jake Laskawa will be there. And we'll continue to cover the transfer portal at SpartanMag.com. SpartanMag.com, the leader for Michigan State football, basketball, recruiting, coverage, and conversation. You get the coverage, and then over at the Underground Bunker message board, conversation, we talk about all these things. If you like it, go check it out. You'll become addicted to it, and you'll be a better person for it. Dylan Freechin says, Comp, how about those Michigan State hockey Spartans? What a weekend. Augustine is special. Yeah, Augustine, terrific in the first game out at Minnesota. Michigan State was ranked number 1 in the country 2 weeks ago. Then they split out in Wisconsin, dropped to number 3, and Minnesota Golden Gophers became number 1 in the country. And then Michigan State went out to Minneapolis this past weekend. Tie on Friday night. Then Michigan State wins the shootout. A lot of you guys know or don't know, NCAA does not recognize shootout victories. The pairwise ratings do not recognize shootout victories for computer rankings, which set the seeds for the brackets. But the Big Ten, for entertainment value and other reasons, they have shootouts at the end of an overtime if it's tied. They want everybody to go home knowing that one team won or lost, so whoever wins the shootout gets the extra point. If you win in overtime, you get 2 points, the losing team gets 1. If you win in a shootout, you get 2 and it's 1. Michigan State got that on Friday, and then on Saturday came back from a 3-1.
NCAA does not recognize shootout victories.
To accept, press 1. To send a voicemail, press 2.
I think this is Matt Hammond, is it not?
Overtime, you get 2 points. The losing team gets 1. If you win in the shootout, you
Hey,
get
Matt.
2 and it's 1.
So, Matt, yeah, you need to you got to turn off your sound.
Saturday.
Okay.
All right. How's it going, Matt? You are on the air. Matt Hammond, ladies and gentlemen. I gave your name. Your pen name is Matt Dorsey. When you called in, that's what it says on my phone. So anyway, Matt
That's
Dorsey.
all right.
It's good. We're good. Matt Dorsey, longtime recruiting expert for Spartan Magazine, SpartanMag.com, going way back to the John L. Smith era, and a good friend of mine for a long time. It's great to have him call in. He was over here in the comments area. Now we got him live and in person. Matt, what are you thinking? What's going on? Pick a subject. Go. What's going
Actually,
on?
Jim, it was I think it was
Oakland?
the B-Dub areas when I started.
Bobby Williams, that's right. Jim Miller was defensive
Yeah.
coordinator. It goes back that far. Sure, yes.
Yeah. So, well, first I just want to say, hey, Jason's doing a great job of trying to track all this stuff down. It's not easy as somebody who's sort of been there, done that, and especially in today's society where there's so much stuff going through social media. You just have to be, plugged in 24/7 to try to keep up with all that stuff. And it's definitely not easy to do. And so, kudos to him for being able to try to keep track of all this stuff and trying to track kids down, because it's definitely, it's a task, put it that way. So just getting in touch with kids can be the most difficult point.
Yeah. So I know you still follow recruiting, and it's great to have you post over at the Underground Bunker message board. I'm sure you probably went through Michigan State signing day signees, a few of them. I don't know if you've tackled all of them, but any of those players catch your eye? And are any of these? Do you have any thoughts about the wide receiver portal commitment Michigan State had tonight? Any thoughts about any of those things?
Well, first, the portal, since that's kind of the hot topic, so to speak, is, yeah, I think it was, I really liked the commitment they got tonight, or today, obviously, picking up a wide receiver. The idea was they really want to kind of like reshape that wide receiver room, and they lost two guys that, had played, quality minutes, at Michigan State. So, they definitely need guys who can step in and be that second and third wide receiver, alongside Marsh. I mean, they do have some young guys, and you hope that they're going to eventually step up, but they need guys who can step in and play right away. And so this is one who definitely looks like he has that ability to play right away, step in and be somebody who they can rely on. That's the thing that we've kind of mentioned, is that, it's a little bit of a gamble going in the portal, because, you're hoping you're going to get these guys. And, at some point in time, you wonder about, are they going to be willing to spend the money? Because, you see some of these teams like Texas Tech and Minnesota, who obviously it looks like, they have spent some money. So that's one of the things that Michigan State's going to have to look at, as far as, now they do offer, as, Jason said, there's guys that want to come because there's playing time. And Michigan State does offer good playing time options for offensive linemen, for running back, for wide receivers. But, in the end, money talks as well. So, and the kids that are in the portal, they're going to be confident. They're going to think that they can go a lot of places and start. So it's one of those things where, Michigan State's probably going to have to spend some money to get some of these kids, because, unfortunately they're coming off a season where they didn't go to a bowl game. When you're competing against a team, somebody said, well, how's Minnesota getting these players? Well, obviously they're spending, but PJ Fleck has gone to a bowl game 6 of the last 7 years. So, he's got a little something to sell there. So Michigan State needs to, it might be a situation where sometimes you have to pay a little bit more to get kids. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But, I do like a lot of, I've watched some film of the kids. You mentioned the running backs. The kid that looked really good from UCLA, because I remember watching him last year at UCLA a couple times, and he looked really good. I don't know if the new system that they were running there with Coach Foster or if that changed, or what their offensive line situation, but his stats did fall off. But we did catch the ball a lot. I think he had like 40 receptions. So that was a positive. So he, I think he would be a quality addition if they're able to add somebody like him. But, I'm kind of like you. It's great that they got 2 commitments in the portal. Obviously I'd like to see a couple more, just to, because there are, this team does need an infusion of quality, talent, and depth if they're going to take a step next year.
Can you imagine? You've been an observer of Michigan State recruiting for about 25 years, Matt, 24 years, and recruiting always had a lot of pressure attached to it. You got to have a good recruiting class. And there's always shenanigans going on and just a lot of paranoia and all these things. Then you sign your class, take a deep breath. Then you end up redshirting 2/3 of them, and then 1/3 of them don't end up finishing with you. But usually you're planting your seed corn, and it pops up later. There was pressure enough around recruiting back then. Matt, can you imagine coaching today when you've got to turn over a roster and you're expecting to bring in 20 new players from the portal? Not all of them are going to be guys that play right away. Last year when they went and got 23 out of the portal, there were 4 or 5 that they thought were more long-term guys. Most players in the portal want to play right away, but there's going to be some guys like this tight end who was at South Carolina, played 1 game. He might be more patient. He might be more of a long-term guy, but at 6'5", 250, he might be a guy that gives them some brute force bulk in the blocking department, which is something that they need. So I don't want to say that kid can't play right away if he ends up choosing Michigan State. But can you imagine the pressure building through the portal or replenishing through the portal? And, Jonathan Smith's going to be in his 2nd season this year. And in the old days, you got at least 4 years, And I assume he's going to get a lot of time. But coaches these days, they know how it is. They know that there's pressure from the jump. Can you imagine the portal being this big of a part of it when you're out there right now in the portal trying to find players and seeing what kind of booster money you have or whatever money to go to help pay for free agency? It's changed a lot, Matt. I've not really asked you about it point blank, but can you imagine?
Yeah, I think it's obviously very difficult, and it just amps it up that much more as far as how important it is because, like I said, Michigan State, they can't walk into, next year with the wide receiver room that they presently have and the running back room that they presently have and just because of the guys that have left the program. So the portal becomes, and hey, they got young guys they didn't sign a big class. And I really like some of the guys that they actually signed, but you can't rely on true freshmen to come in and be, a difference maker at so many different spots. So the portal it is that important. I did see an interesting stat though that, which I thought was kind of interesting. Do you know what 4 teams had the most portal additions last year?
In Division I?
Yes.
Portal additions. Last year, Michigan State had 23. I think Washington and Arizona might have had a lot. Indiana, no. Boston College did not have much turnover.
I think it
Ole
was.
Miss,
well, maybe it was like
Florida State.
It was new players. Maybe it was new players and not necessarily just portal additions.
Mm-hmm.
The stat I saw mentioned the teams that had the most were Michigan State, Indiana, Colorado, and Alabama.
Alabama, huh? Now Michigan State, if you count new players, remember the number that was floated around last summer is that Michigan State had 61 new players when you counted walk-ons. Like more than half of their roster were new people, and they, Michigan State had pretty good chemistry from that and played some pretty good football at times, but not so good in the fourth quarter of a lot of games and not so good down the stretch at the end of the season. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I just thought it was interesting that 3 of those 4 teams actually, had good seasons. Now Alabama would debate that they had a good season, but they still won 9 games and are ranked in the top 15 in the country. But then of course Indiana had a good season, Colorado had a good season. So the fact of the matter is that you can go into the portal and if you get the right players, you can turn your program around. So Colorado's done it, Indiana's done it. So it's a possibility where you can really make drastic changes in the portal. So I think that is a positive. Hopefully we see a situation where Michigan State's able to, like I said, I think that like you were saying, if they're going to look to add 20 players, you would think that 10 and 10 would be a good way to look at it. If you can get some guys now. And I just think the dates are all out of whack, though. Like you mentioned, these guys that, are trying to play in bowl games, they can't even put in for the portal right now, and you have situations where, people are, some people are putting in for the portal. Then you have people that are going to wait because they want to play in the bowl game. Well, then they're going to go through spring practice, and then they're going to basically screw their team over by leaving after spring practice, which makes it that much difficult for teams to, have to scramble last minute like Michigan State had to do last year at defensive tackle, scrambling last minute to get guys. And I just think the way that the dates that they have things set up right now, like I mentioned on the message board, that having signing day on December 4th was just stupid. I don't know whose idea that was. You had multiple teams signing classes when they had no head coach. When has that ever happened? I don't think it's ever happened, but that's what happened when you have a signing day, within 3 days of the season ending. So, they need to really look at the dates of when, the portal's open and when signing day is, to try to, sort of make a little bit, I know it's crazy, but try to make a little bit less crazy, if that's kind of the best way that I can describe it.
Right. So, Matt, what did you think about year one of Jonathan Smith at Michigan State? You there?
Yeah, can you hear me, Jim?
Yeah. Jonathan Smith, can you hear me? Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Question, Jonathan Smith's first year at Michigan State, what were your thoughts?
First year at Michigan State, I was somewhat optimistic. They came in and they did some pretty decent things at Michigan State after that first year. I remember, the screen game was huge that year. If you remember, they were running screens all over the place. And and there was
talking about Jonathan Smith, not John L. Smith.
Oh, Jonathan Smith. I thought it was John L. Smith.
No.
Okay,
the 2024 football season.
I'm optimistic. I still think that he's the right guy, for the job. I do think that, I think he understands, that, it's not going to happen overnight. With that being said, I also think that the landscape is just so crazy right now. And I think that you have to have your ducks in a row, from, just the whole portal situation. And then obviously, I don't even want to get in the whole NIL situation because nobody really knows, what's going on with Michigan State's NIL. So you just hope that, Michigan State, is on a level playing field with, I don't expect Michigan State to be on a level playing field with Ohio State. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
And if Oklahoma wants to go out and spend crazy money for Spencer Brown, knock yourself out. I do expect Michigan State to be on a level playing field with a Texas Tech or a Minnesota, so I think that's something that you hope that that's the case. And unfortunately, there's no way for us to really know if that is the case. Are they you'd like to think it because Michigan State is, as far as a name program, I believe is a bigger name than those programs. So, Michigan State needs to be at least on that level, if not higher. So, just there's a pecking order, and you just hope that everything is there for Coach Smith to have success, because I do believe that if he has the resources, then he will have success, because I think it's a good football staff that he's put together. And that's one thing that I think will be interesting to watch is, he still needs to hire a defensive backs coach. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's one of the things that he hasn't been able to do because he's worried about the portal right now, is trying to figure out who's going to be the next defensive backs coach. But that's also something that could help in the portal. In a sense, if you bring in a defensive backs coach who's got a proven track record, that might have previous relationships with other kids, that might help you in the portal. Because let's say you bring somebody in from just for example, you pick a school like, Cincinnati. And then next thing you know, that guy brings, somebody from Cincinnati with him. Or maybe that guy recruited somebody who ended up committing to another school and they're in the portal and he's able to get them. So that'll be something to sort of pay attention to. Martin was able to do that, to help Michigan State's recruiting last year. So maybe that'll happen this year as well, as the portal will be able to get a coach who's going to assist in doing well in the transfer portal.
Yeah, Michigan State in recruiting, transfer portal. Demetrius Martin was a good recruiter, energetic recruiter. Other members of the Michigan State football staff getting a lay of the land of recruiting for Michigan State, not only in the state of Michigan, but the region, the Midwest, and outwardly. They've one lap of recruiting at Michigan State. Now in lap 2, they got to take it up some more RPMs. I think they're probably recognizing that. They got to get after it, and they know that. So interesting that Michigan State signed, 17 or 18. And, in the old days, Matt, if you had 33% attrition, then you could do pretty well with the other 67%. 33% come starters, the other 33% are contributors, and you lose 33%. That's a good, solid class. That was the way a lot of people used to map it out in the old days. Nowadays, with players looking to move on all the time, having 66% retention would be astronomical in this day and age, I would think. I think 50% is, I suspect that's what's going to end up leveling off at, and then you got to do the rest of it, evaluation in the portal. That's what they're doing right now, and we learn as we go along. And as we go along, as observers of college football in the Big Ten and nationally, it remains to be seen which of these programs become the best at evaluation and player development within this climate. It's not always going to be the ones that go out and throw Steinbrenner money around. You saw what happened with Florida State this year. Ole Miss threw a lot of money around. They didn't make the playoff. It was playoff or bust. Well, they didn't make it. And then I think you're going to see a lot of these seismic changes. All of a sudden Indiana comes out of nowhere. They're in the playoff. Florida State was undefeated. Now they just go in the dumps. You saw what happened with Michigan. Now Michigan had a coaching change. Washington had a coaching change. But I think you're going to see some ups and downs. And I think Indiana, I know they've got really good coaching, and they did a good job getting the max out of their potential this year, although I didn't think their coaching did well against Ohio State. I thought they had too many vertical routes against blitzes against Ohio State, and they kept getting sacked. I didn't think Ohio State was all that good that day. They won by a big margin. Everybody was impressed with Ohio State, beat Indiana 38-7, ended up 38-14, whatever it was. I didn't think Ohio State played that well that day. I thought it was 7-7 for a quarter and a half, and Indiana blew it on a fumbled punt and a punt return for a touchdown. 21-7, game changed, and I didn't think Ohio State played that well, and I was not surprised that Ohio State lost to Michigan. I was not surprised. Around the country, you're talking about some of these other teams, and Nick Saban has an interesting comment about a lot of things, and he said success leaves clues. Success leaves clues. And you mentioned about Michigan State should be able to battle with Minnesota and Texas Tech, depending on what money is available and so forth. And you look at the Big Ten. Of course, Oregon's really good. They've been recruiting like crazy. Ohio State is powerful. Don't expect to compete with Ohio State, but you can beat them once in a while if you're really operating at 100% capacity. Michigan's been up and down, frankly, over the last 6 years. Had a high water mark last year with some cheating going on to get them there, but they finished well. Alleged cheating. Are we saying alleged? Do we really need to say alleged cheating? I don't know. So anyway, you have ups and downs. Right now in the Big Ten, in terms of middleweight programs that are punching above their weight class, Illinois goes 9-3 this year, had a manageable schedule, did well. Brett Bielema was a fit, as it turned out there, knows the Midwest, knows the Big Ten, goes to Illinois, puts together a solid workmanlike team, and they, not a great team, but they happen to be a team that wins most Saturdays. Rutgers this year had a losing streak late in the year, midway through the year due to injuries, and is up 7-5. We'll have to wait and see what they do in the bowl games. Maybe they didn't win as many games as I thought they could or should, but those are two programs. Success leaves clues. They hire Bielema at Illinois, and they got out of his way. And he was able to build that program without much pressure because Illinois has not been very good lately, right? They let Bielema build it slowly, piece by piece. That being said, he was a fit. He knows the landscape. Schiano, second tour of duty at Rutgers. He's a fit and knows the landscape. This year maybe didn't have the breakthrough that was possible. Injuries might have something to do with it. But you saw what Rutgers did at Michigan State in week 12. Jonathan Smith and his staff still needs to show that they're a fit and they understand the landscape. If they do, and if Michigan State is able to shut up and get out of the way and let them build the way Bielema did, success leaves clues. That's the way Michigan State needs to get it done too. If and when they do find the right fit, and if Smith proves that, and he's got the hunger to prove that he is the right guy, I think it's not easy to build a proven program in the Big Ten. What Mark D'Antonio did was worthy of Hall of Fame induction. Hard to do. Hard to stay in a job for more than 2 years. You look at the 18 teams of the Big Ten. There's only, I think I mentioned this in the last show a couple weeks ago, there's only like 4 or 5 schools that have had a coach for more than 4 years. Like Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers for 5 years, Bielema for 4 years, Iowa for 100 years with, what's his name? Ferentz. and PJ Fleck at Minnesota. Other than that, everybody else is in their first or second year in the Big Ten. UCLA, first year. Oregon, fourth year. Washington, first year. Michigan State, first year. Indiana, first year. Wisconsin, third or fourth year, and he's on the ropes. Purdue, 2 years, fired. I think that pretty much covers it. Northwestern, second year. It's to get to year number 4 or 5 these days, hard to do. And Michigan State's going to try to build slowly, and you hope for their sake that they don't feel like they've got to throw a bunch of Hail Marys. But, you see Indiana do it right away with the portal, but then you see other programs go up and down with the portal, and a tough landscape, and these coaches are well compensated, but there's not many people in any profession in the world that work harder than college football coaches. You've seen that.
Yeah, I agree. And one thing that did surprise me this year a little bit about, from a Michigan State recruiting standpoint, like I said, I don't know how things, the inner workings, but I was surprised that they did only take an 18-man class. As far as when you consider the amount of attrition you're going to have in the portal, I think it makes sense to take take that 20 some man class. And the reality is that with the portal and with NIL money now, it's almost like, especially with I think linemen, I think you can almost have like open tryouts with these guys, and just take a couple guys. Take 6 linemen every single year. And then when they don't pan out, you sit there and let them know that there won't be NIL money for them. And then what they're going to do is they're going to leave, and, you hope one of those guys or 2 of those guys that you take that, end up turning into something special, who knows, you always see these guys at the MAC and everybody's like, how in the world did this guy end up at Central Michigan? He ends up being a great offensive lineman. How does this guy end up at, wherever, and he's an great offense and ends up being an NFL offensive lineman? Well, I would think that the portal and the way NIL is set up is you should be able to, that should allow the Big Ten teams to be able to scoop up those guys and, and keep them. And of course, if they're not that good, then you kick them to the MAC,
Yeah.
But the reason I say that is I thought there was 3 offensive linemen in the state of Michigan this year. At the end, they all end up going, pretty much BCS level schools. So I thought, man, it just makes sense to take 1 or 2 of these guys. And if they don't turn out, then you know what? The next year you don't have NIL money for them. I mean, if they realize everybody else is getting, they're still on scholarship, but they're going to realize that if everybody else is getting NIL money and I'm not, they're not going to stay. They're going to go somewhere where they can play.
Yeah.
So I just think that
especially now that there's not a hard 85 scholarship ceiling. Michigan State plans to operate with 85, but you can fudge up to 90 if you've got the funding for it. I don't know if Michigan State has the funding to do that, but yeah, 18. I kind of other schools bring in 20, 25, and they're not going to be keeping 25 for the long haul. So these 25 we're bringing in, they're going to try out. They're going to be trying out.
That's what I was, especially with the offensive line, because you just never know. So that's what. I kept thinking, I was just like, man, I would have, the one kid went to Texas Tech and the other kid ended up going to Illinois. And I was just, I kind of thought that it would have made sense to take those guys, give them a scholarship. And then obviously, hey, if it looks like they're going to be successful, then there's NIL money for them. Obviously, if they're not, then, hey, you're still on scholarship, but we don't have NIL money for them. And then the kid's going to they're not dumb. They're going to end up seeing the writing on the wall, and they're going to realize, well, maybe I need to be at Central Michigan, or maybe I need to be at Ball State, or even something at Ferris State, or who knows what it is. So that was something that I think that, and like I said, I think everybody's still trying to figure it out. That's the whole point. Everybody's still trying to figure out how this portal is going to work and everything. So, it is just, but it is one of those situations that, you don't have, if you're a head coach, you don't have a lot of time. I mean, Jonathan Smith goes out the next year and doesn't make a bowl game. Year 3, he'll definitely, I'm not sure from a money standpoint, he'll be on the hot seat, but from a public relations standpoint, he'll be on the hot seat.
Yeah. And they know that. Yeah. I mean, look at Florida this year. A lot of people thought that Billy Napier was going to get fired for sure this year with a tough schedule at Florida. but they started playing better. And then they got a big win against LSU and a big win against Ole Miss. He saved his job with a 7-5 record. How they were losing those games created some belief, and it led toward better games against LSU and Florida. If you're going to go 5-7 again, you don't want to get blown out 41-14 by a lot of teams. That won't look good going into year 3 and so forth. That's just the nature of the business. In terms of signing 18, I'd have to have that explained to me as well. I would have thought there'd been strength in numbers, but I hadn't really studied exactly where the numbers were and what the ceiling numbers are and so forth. But 18 does not give you a lot to work with in terms of building with young players moving forward if you assume some are going to be leaving. But they may not assume players are going to be leaving. Maybe they really believe with their evaluation and player development that they're going to be hanging on to these guys long-term, program-oriented guys. I think Izzo right now has the type of roster with the personalities that he can really mold and communicate with and motivate and inspire with team attitudes. Guys like Trey Holloman, been sticking around for 3 years, behind A.J. Hoggard and others, and comes into this year with Jeremy Fears as the starting point guard, and Trey Holloman's like, okay, when's practice? Just keeps practicing. He becomes a captain. Now he's starting and getting more minutes than anybody, but just a lovely team-first personality, and he's got a lot of guys on the team that way, and I'll be eager to see exactly what that allows Michigan State to become in terms of basketball. Chemistry is so important. Mark D'Antonio used to talk about that. And as much of a renegade program as Michigan was in recent years under Jim Harbaugh, and he was on the ropes and that team quit on him in 2020, somehow he's able to stir it back up and get everybody all on the same page and the same brand and flavor of renegade football in terms of cheating and being disrespectful to everybody, trying to be like the new version of the 1989 Miami Hurricanes or something, and made it work and got those guys to be team first with physical football, and it worked. I'm still amazed that they were able to do that. So, Michigan State with Jonathan Smith, he's trying to build team-oriented chemistry like Izzo has right now. Izzo wants that every year, and he's not always able to harness it. Harbaugh did it in a really strange way, but got it done. But Jonathan Smith wants team-oriented chemistry. If you're recruiting a guy and the first thing he wants to talk about is NIL and how much money you're going to give him, unless you're Billy Sims, Michigan State just might pass and look for the next guy. I don't know that for a fact, but that's kind of just feeling around the room a little bit. That's kind of the way things seem to be shaping up. And if you get it together and you evaluate well and you do get chemistry like that, maybe you can put together some dangerous weapons.
Yeah, and I think Michigan, I think Harbaugh was able to do it. Credit to him, even though the team quit on him. He when you're winning 10 games a year, which he basically was winning 10 games a year, and you basically threw a lot of money at guys to keep guys from going into the NFL draft, which they did as well. That was a smart move on their part. So I think that's how they were sort of able to keep that environment, around as they were able to having success. So it's one of those things where people are much less likely. Nobody's going to leave Michigan State 2013 or 14 or 15. Why would you? On the other hand, when teams go 5-7 and teams aren't making bowl games, then all of a sudden it makes it much harder to do that. Winning makes everything easier, so that's something that from a portal standpoint, that it's one of the I doubt Indiana's having a lot of issues in the portal this year as far as team players leaving. I know the one guy who left, he left because he wasn't playing. And he was, obviously the new coach, Signetti is not on board with him, so that's why the kid left and he's committed. I saw he just committed to Michigan. So, but that's an example. But for the most part, kids aren't going to leave Indiana and kids aren't going to leave Illinois this year that much, and just because of the success. So at some point in time, you don't want to get into the circle where you're having to constantly overpay to keep kids, because that's not sustainable. So.
Right. Another dynamic that's changing before I let you go. I heard Ari Wasserman talk about this. Actually, it was Andy Staples, the great podcast on 3, talking about in recent years, not too long ago when Nick Saban was stacking number 1 ranked recruiting classes, it was not uncommon for Alabama and Georgia and Ohio State to sign 12, 13, 14 top 100 players. 14 of the top 100 going to Alabama. You know what I mean? Now the top recruiting classes are signing 7 top 100s. 14 are not going to the same school anymore. So we saw some seasons in which Alabama was dominant as the national champion. The team that came in second was blown out. We saw LSU dominant as a national champion. We saw Georgia dominant as a national champion. And you know, the initial 4-team playoff, you saw blowouts in the semifinals. I mean, teams that were finishing third and fourth couldn't compete with the top team. Now the earth is more flat. You're not seeing these super teams anymore. And you're not seeing teams sign 14 top 100 players every year. You know, over the course of 4 years at Alabama, there'd be 56 guys on the roster that were top 100. You know, a few would leave here and there, but they were different than everybody else. The rules changed, the landscape changes, and guess what? Nick Saban retires. He don't want to play that game anymore, so he's done. So smart move by him, but he's always been a step ahead of the trouble. But the landscape is more flat now. And, you know, maybe Georgia will rise up and win a national title. I don't know if their quarterback's going to be able to play. The backup might end up being better anyway. I mean, Oregon, are they going to do it? Can Tennessee beat Ohio State? I mean, there's 12 in there. I thought when they expanded to 12, there'd be all kinds of bloodbath blowouts everywhere based on what we saw 4 or 5 years ago. But instead, this 12-game expansion has happened at the same time that the earth is more flat and there's a little bit more, I don't want to say parity, but you don't have those superpowers anymore. And I think going forward, it's going to be harder to establish and remain a superpower. And I don't know, there's going to be some fan bases and some programs that might not be able to swallow that all too well. You know, look at Ohio State. They win a lot right now, but they're not happy. But your thoughts before I let you go on general landscape and whether Michigan State at some point can plan on finishing in the top 4 in the Big Ten, because top 4 in the Big Ten will get you in. Top 3 for sure. Some years top 4. Your thoughts on the general landscape?
Yeah, I think the one thing that, you know, somebody made a good point. I forget who was talking about this. They were talking about being able to hold on to your quality second string guys. You know, and sometimes these guys are, like, let's say, a sophomore. You know, I mean, I'm trying to think of a Michigan State analogy that I could actually make. You know,
if you go back to 2013, 2014,
a really good second string player, and then they just had to sort of bide their time because there was, you know, somebody had. I mean,
the whole defense.
You know me. I was always a huge Terrell Dortch guy. All right, I love Terrell Dortch as a running back, and you know what happened to him as a running back. But think about Terrell Dortch. All right, you know, if after he spent his freshman year at Michigan State, if the portal was around, would he have stayed at Michigan State?
No. Nope.
No, because they're going with Duckett. And he was like, I'm a running back, I'm gone. And if Terrell Dortch leaves Michigan State, he probably goes someplace else. And, you know, he rushes for ridiculous amounts of yards and helps that team, you know, win a lot of games. And who knows, maybe he's a Kenneth Walker-esque player at some other school. Because I do think he had incredible running back talent, but obviously, you know, they went with Duckett, and you can't blame them because what, you know. But the reality is that's the type of player that, you know, what happens when a Terrell Dortch leaves and then Duckett gets hurt? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're having to play somebody, you know, Little John Flowers is your starting running back. You know, your every down back, you know, and now you're just not at that same level. And that's what people are talking about is going to happen at, you know, Ole Miss might have a great starting running back, and they got this really good guy who's second string, but he's like, you know what, I'm not sticking around. I'm out of here. I want to go someplace where I can play right away. Mm-hmm. So it's keeping that quality second string talent, you know, in the case of injuries or, you know, obviously for the future that makes it very difficult. And I think that's what's going to, quote unquote, level out the playing field, because that guy might just be second string because he's only a sophomore and somebody else is a senior. And he's going to be better than that guy eventually, but right now he's not. So, you know, he's willing to, you know, put his name in the portal. Yeah. And so that's one of the things I think will level out the playing field is, you know, I mean, Michigan State's another example. I mean, you know, the quarterback position. I mean, you know, kudos to Nick Foles for, you know, leaving Michigan State when he did. But, you know, I mean, you know, Keith Nickel, you know, he would have rolled out in the portal. Yes. You know. Well, you know, he would have rolled out, and he probably would have gone to Central Michigan or something like that, and he probably would have, you know, thrown for 10,000 yards or something ridiculous. You know?
He might still be in the NFL.
but you couldn't do that back in the day. So I think that's the whole idea, is that, that leveling the playing field is that second quality depth. It's going to be hard for teams to hold on to it, especially if they can't pay for it.
And
so,
the teams that can build it, whoever has that secret sauce to make it happen. You look back at the glory years in a different climate, but guys like Tony Lippett, took him 3 years. Curtis Drummond took him 3 years. Danikos Allen took him a while. Stayed around, redshirt, second string, boom, starting as a redshirt junior for the best defense in the country, one of the best. All those guys. Can't do that anymore, I don't think, unless you've got a special situation. Or some of these programs like Brigham Young, Boise State, under the radar, maybe they can build something, Washington State.
I don't know. I'll give you a great example of, I'm sitting there today and I'm hearing about, I'm just doing a little NFL stuff, and I don't pay attention to the NFL as much as I should, but I think Miami has a really good running back, the Dolphins, who's doing really well. Bucky something, I don't know what his name was, but I just looked it up because I was like, I've never heard of the guy. And I was like, oh yeah, that's the guy who was at Oregon, and he was Oregon's running back. Well, here's the crazy thing is, where he was before he was at Oregon?
Where?
Minnesota.
Bucky. Wow.
Minnesota actually got him, and it was a big time recruit for Minnesota. But then all of a sudden, Oregon basically threw money. I'm sure Oregon threw money at him, and that's what they do at Oregon. They throw money and uniforms at people and got the guy. Well, the guy went to Oregon and just tore it up, and now he's in the NFL. But I was just like, that was a big coup for, PJ Fleck holding on to the guy, and he had a really nice freshman year, and then all of a sudden, Oregon comes in and steals him away. But so it's such a crazy, situation right now. You got to try to keep the guys that you have, and then you got to go out and try to fill holes at the same time. And it's almost like, trying to putting your fingers in a dam. Sometimes I think that's the way, you almost have to look at it. So, because, you're trying to develop young kids, hold on to decent players, and then go out and, fill holes as well at the same time. It's much more difficult than it was just 5 years ago when D'Antonio was still the coach at Michigan State. And maybe that's why he got out, because he saw the writing on the wall.
It's certainly different. Matt, I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your time. You be good. I'll talk to you soon, all right?
Okay, and hey, how about those Lady Spartans?
It was good today, man. It was exciting. It was exciting, man.
It is. That's great. That's great to hear. And I'm definitely, I'm paying as much attention to them as I am the men. So
yeah,
and I'm sure a lot of other Spartans are as well.
What they do with the Michigan State women's basketball, among the many things that they do well, with the full court pressure today, over the course of time, Iowa did not have trouble with it in the first opening minutes, but Michigan State just keeps doing it, and they alter the press a little bit. It's like it's man to man, and then they'll send run and jump at you a little bit with traps here and there. Not every time, just some of the time. So it's a little bit of a change up. You don't know if it's fastball or change up coming at you, but they're pressing, and when they do trap, it doesn't seem like they have to pay for it. A lot of times in basketball, if someone presses, you break the press, you make them pay for it with a layup. They're able to trap, and then they don't get beat on the back end. At least I'm not seeing it. Maybe the better teams will do that. Iowa's a pretty good team, but they trap, and then they rotate back and don't get beat. Today, Iowa had some size advantages, did some screen slips, the women's team talking about. Michigan State did a good job, rotation, help on the other side, getting some charges and some turnovers over there. Iowa ended up with like 21 turnovers. And Michigan State does a lot of things that seems a little helter-skelter with defense, but it's not. It's helter-skelter, but they don't pay for it. There's a balance there that they've found that's pretty good right now. And you talk about the portal. The girl Nia Hampton today went on offense and had an erupted for some field goals late, but she was Mid-America Conference Defensive Player of the Year. And then Simmons, a guard transfer, was, I think, Defensive Player of the Year in the Pac-12 at Arizona State. So they went out, and not only did they press, they want people that are thieves in that press. And Nyla Hampton came through big. Theron Halleck, Ty Halleck's daughter, she's a pit bull. She can fly. First of all, she's fast, a lot of intensity. And then Jen Simmons transferred in from Arizona State. A lot of role players, togetherness, a lot of fun, good crowd today, and they are an entertaining commodity right now. Michigan State women's basketball 10-0. number 17 in the country, I think, and rising. And the Big Ten is probably the best conference in the country this year. 4 of the top 11 in the rankings right now, including number 1 USC. All right, Matt. Well, I'll let you go, man. Thanks a lot.
Okay, take care.
Take care. There he goes, Matt Dorsey. Let's look over here at the. We've been going for 2 hours already. Let's get back to the mailbag. Where are we? Let's go over here. We'll go question number 2. All right, Mullen Lobby from Gladwin, Michigan. Jim, what is your assessment of the portal departures from Michigan State? Are you excited about any specific offers and visits from potential transfers? Charles Brantley talked about that earlier. 3rd time in the portal. I think the door closed behind him this time. Good player. Could have helped Michigan State next year, but I think it's like, are you with us or not type of situation like Aiden Childs was talking about. Isaiah Johnson, wide receiver, pretty good player. I thought that he would have had a future at Michigan State. I thought he could have a future at Michigan State. I don't know if he was a guy that they kind of said, you know what, we don't really envision you being part of the future, or if he just wanted to hunt for something else. I'm not sure. I thought he was pretty good, but Michigan State looked to move on. Glover, same thing, going to the portal multiple times. The receivers are the ones that had me scratching my head a little bit. Johnson, and this is a Michigan State team that does not have a lot of returning offensive firepower, but they're looking to rebuild it. And they had Omari Kelly today, committed out of the portal from Middle Tennessee State. So maybe that's an upgrade over what Jaron Glover was going to be next year. That's the Michigan State's kind of gambling that way. We'll see what happens. Ken Talley, I don't know anything good or bad about his attitude or team commitment. I really have not heard. He's a guy that looked productive as a pass rusher early in the season and then leveled way off, goes into the portal. This is a team that does not have much in terms of pass rush. You saw worst in the Big Ten in terms of pass rush. So anyone who showed a flicker of hope as a pass rusher, again, I'm just thinking they're already not much of a pass rush team. Can they really afford to lose one guy that showed a flicker of hope? Or was the attitude and commitment not great? I don't know. But it's kind of like some of those receivers. These were not world beaters, but they were young players who might have a flash of potential. Then you lose them. It's one step back. Can you get 2 steps forward out of the portal? That's what they have to do right now. Redshirt senior offensive lineman Dallas Fincher started a little bit 2 years ago, was in the playing group for a little bit this year, then worked out of the playing group. Basically, I think that not good enough to win with, quite frankly. And problem is there's nothing proven behind him. So if you move him out, it's not like people are moving up. There's some young players with some promise and some potential, but they're not proven right now. But Fincher, in all due respect, I don't think he's good enough to win with right now. And they're looking for players that they can win with. Again, rolling the dice to see if they can get something better out of the portal. Avery Dunn, same thing, defensive end. Not in the playing group this year, played a little bit last year. Actually got into the playing group 2 years ago when Michigan State lost a lot of defensive linemen after the tunnel incident at Michigan and so forth. And Avery Dunn came out from the 3rd string and played some functional football at defensive end, but never really built on that. Again, not good enough to win with. Same with tight end Ademola Fillet. Fillet, I thought, was the most improved scholarship player on the team, because I thought when he came in from Norfolk State, I didn't think he had a chance. And the first year didn't play. And when he was in the portal, he came in, and on this podcast, I said, don't expect much. I was trying to be nice and diplomatic. I'm like, don't expect much from him in year 1. And I didn't expect much in year 2, but they've got him in the weight room, and he grew up a little bit, got on the field, caught a couple passes, was functional. But again, is that a guy that you're going to win with in the future? He improved to the point that he became a guy, but they want dudes, right? And that's all well and good if those guys are leaving, if you're bringing in dudes. So we'll have to wait and see what the dude count is later on. Redshirt freshman defensive back, Phillip Davis. I never saw him play, so I don't know. He committed, 2 years ago? I never saw him play. True freshman safety, Jalen Thompson, on the field this year due to injury, started at the end of the year, had some trouble tackling here and there, which is understandable for a true freshman thrust into the playing group when really he should be redshirting. But not quite the dog that you want back there. So he's gone, and I think they're okay with that. Aaron Alexander, linebacker, who came in he was at University of Michigan, then went to UMass, transferred to Michigan State, got on the field a little bit, never really saw much there, so he's gone. Not surprised. Sophomore long snapper Jack Carson Wentz replaced Caden Schickel. Schickel was injured in the Michigan game. I assume Schickel's likely going to be coming back. So when somebody wins a long snapping job, the other guy, it's kind of like quarterbacks. They're looking for another job elsewhere. So all those are pretty understandable. The wide receiver thing, it's a little bit of a crapshoot. Charles Brantley, maybe a little bit of a statement situation as Michigan State continues to try to nail down and build a culture and a mentality. And a lot of those are along those lines. A lot of those guys were in the portal immediately, and it's been a few days since anyone has joined them in the portal. So I'll be intrigued to see if other names add them. I thought there might be one on the offensive line that would jump in, but it's not happened yet. Quite frankly, Jordan Hall's been an interesting one. Played a lot as a true freshman. This year, more of a second-string guy. And I think there's something to work with there, and we'll see where that one goes. I've not heard anything there, so maybe no news is good news there. Question 3, Desert Sparty from Arizona says, Jim, if you could add one player from the transfer portal to the Michigan State roster, who would it be? Anybody from the portal? The entire portal? What is there, 1,500 players in the portal? I've not watched film on all 1,500. Hate to disappoint you. I think you got to have offensive linemen. You got to have wide receivers. Wide receivers they'll come. Pass rushers, hot commodity. Didn't have any this year. I would be looking for offensive linemen and pass rushers. No stroke of brilliance there by any chance. And I've not looked at these guys' film, but I looked at the On3 rankings in the portal for edge players. Number 1 is somebody named Ben Bell from Texas State. I don't know anything about him. I don't know who he's looking at. Number 4 is Will Helt, 6'5", 250 for Purdue. I thought he was pretty good for Purdue this year, and I mentioned that in the pre-snap read. He's ranked the number 4 edge player in the portal by On3. He's visiting A&M, Clemson, and LSU. Thank you, Texas Top 100, for that information. He's the type of guy that reminds me of some of the stand-up, big, oversized edge defensive ends that Joe Rossi had at Minnesota. So I thought he would probably fit in the Joe Rossi system, but I've not detected that Michigan State's in on him. Like I said, A&M, Clemson, and LSU for Will Helt. A guy that's not the most fluid guy, but sometimes those big clunky guys are just kind of strangely successful. And Will Helt, number 4, I'd take him. I'm not saying he'd be the one guy, the top guy in the country, but as far as edges go, Clev Lubin, we talked about that earlier when Jason was on the show. Coastal Carolina, Michigan State offered 9.5 sacks last year, considered one of the better pass rushers in the portal. And he told Jason Killip that he does not plan to visit Michigan State. He's visiting Auburn, Minnesota, and Louisville. So there's Minnesota there again, throwing around some money. And you know Auburn is. They got a coach on the hot seat and a lot of desperate people there. Offensive line, I like that guy at Stanford, Luke Beklenko. Talked about him early in the year. Started 9 games in 2024 as a true sophomore. Played 5 as a true freshman in 23. I think he started at left tackle a little bit. But it's looking like Auburn, Oklahoma for him. But if I'm Michigan State and I could take him right now, I think he'd be pretty high on my list. But I don't really, I don't know what's in the portal. I know some high level quarterbacks are in there. I don't really have a great frame of reference on who's in there and who's realistically a Michigan State type of guy. Question number 4, Jackson Davids from Elk Rapids, Michigan. He's not actually from Elk Rapids. I assigned him a city because he didn't post one. People on the bunker, if you're going to post on the mailbag, please put your city. Thank you. Jackson Davids from Elk Rapids, Michigan says, wondering if you've heard anything on how any of these transfer visits have gone so far. Good question. We just went over that for about 30 minutes with Jason Killip. If you're new to the show, wait for it to be over or go back and hit it on. You can stream it later. Is streaming the right word? I don't even know if that's the right word. You can check it out later when Jason was on here. So if you're in the portal, the visits are important, but NIL is a big part of it. How much money do you have? Are you competitive? And then there's others, if you can match what other schools are doing and everybody's telling the truth, which not everybody is. If the compensation packages are somewhat equal, then it's old-fashioned recruiting. How well are the assistant coaches communicating? What do you think of the feel of the team, the camaraderie? Do you feel welcome there? Do you feel like you're part of the team? Do you feel you're part of the family? And then somewhere in there, the comfort level of the campus and the facilities, all those things. Those things come into play if all things are equal in the NIL world for most, I'd say most recruits these days. I don't know if it's all of them. I'll have to ask around a little bit to see how much that comes up. A lot of coaches growl about it and say that's the first thing that comes up. And I'll have to ask around and see if that's the case. But someone like last year when Michigan State got Luke Newman from Holy Cross, I doubt it came up. And he ended up being a good functional left guard. Someone like Ed Woods played some good corner. Nakai Martinez, I doubt Michigan State had to break the bank for those guys, but I'm sure they didn't come to Michigan State for free. What do we have here? Buster777 from Ludington, Michigan. He says, Comp, what's your read on the linebacker crew for Michigan State next fall? I really like the looks of Brady Pretzlaff from Gaylord, Michigan, and maybe see the potential of a future star in him. Pretzlaff, I thought that he was solid, and he played 4 games, preserving a red shirt, so he'll be a redshirt freshman next year. I thought he looked better than a freshman. I thought he looked comfortable, and he'll get even better. I hear the coaches like him. So I think he's a Joe Rossi type middle linebacker. Remember, Joe Rossi had a commitment from him at the University of Minnesota before Rossi came here. And then Pretzlaff followed him here. I think that Pretzlaff looks like some of those middle linebackers that Rossi had for some of his good defenses with the Gophers. So Pretzlaff has a good future. Next year, assuming Wayne Matthews comes back, I think he takes a step as a player, productive, tackler, good in pass defense. They missed him late in the season. Jordan Hall, mentioned him a moment ago. I assume the attitude is good. I think he's got leadership potential. And I think that Michigan State would do well to keep him in the fold. We'll see what happens there. I've not heard anything about any possibilities of him moving on or anything. But anytime you have a guy that started as a true freshman, 4-star recruit, and then is a reserve the next year, it just sometimes it's that category of player that sometimes looks to move on, but he has not. So, each player had exit interviews with Jonathan Smith and the coaches at the end of the year. I'm not privy to what happened in those discussions, but Jordan Hall is not in the portal. And I'm not one that thinks Michigan State's in any position to let proven functional players leave. Now, if someone's a bad apple or sucking oxygen out of the situation, that's different. But Michigan State needs guys, right? They want dudes, and some guys are just guys, but those you can't get rid of all your guys. And he's a guy that could borderline be a dude someday. I'm not big on addition by subtraction in a lot of ways. Marcus Pulliam, linebacker, came in mop-up duty this year, 6'2", 234. I thought he played bigger than 6'2", 234. He played in all 12 games, special teams, played mop-up at linebacker. I thought he ran. I thought he hit. Transfer from Miami. Younger guy. I think he's a guy, could be a playing group player next year. I didn't see much of Samaj Bridgman, transfer from Michigan. I don't know what's there. The only time I've ever seen him play, I saw a couple of snaps this week when Adamole Filet put out some practice video, because he's trying to create attention in the transfer portal. And some of the practice video that he put out was scout team against starters or whatever. And he was on, second team or whatever, going against the scout team defense. And there's Samaj Bridgman. I think he was number 17 or number 19. I'm like, who's that guy? Oh, that's Bridgman. It's the only time I've ever seen him was on Adamola Filet's his scouting tape, his promotional tape. So, linebackers, that's all you got right now. Pretzlaff, Matthews, Hall, Pulliam. Because Halliday graduated. Jordan Scott graduated. Let's see. See if I can find that depth chart. I don't know if I'm forgetting any freshmen. I'm not counting the incoming freshmen. All right, we're going to move on. Question number 6. Say Hey Kid 24 from Mackinac City. No, he's from Madison, Virginia. He says, I think the evaluations of Coach Jonathan Smith are totally premature. He says, I don't think we should assess him until he's been here 3 years. The C- grade I've seen does not take into account how bare the cupboard was and is. When do you think it's appropriate to make an assessment? He's asking me. And this is coming from Say Hey Kid 24. Must be a Willie Mays fan. He says he taught at Michigan State for 45 years, and now he's living in Madison, Virginia, in the Shenandoah Mountains. Yeah, 1 year is not enough to assess anyone. 61 new players, took over a crap show, as everybody knows, and really coming into a new conference, new part of the country. There's a learning curve that's going on there. How many years? I don't know, 3 years, 4 years. It used to be 5 years. Remember, a head coach would have a 5-year plan. Remember those days? George Perlis, what did he go, like 5 and 6 in his first year? Then he made the Cherry Bowl in his second year, and that was a big deal. Michigan State hadn't been to a bowl game in 20 years in 1986. And then they went to in 85, that was. And then in 86, they went to what was it? It was in Birmingham. Was that the Freedom Bowl or not the Independence Bowl? It was the Freedom Bowl, All-American Bowl in Birmingham, Alabama. Lost to Georgia Tech. Then the next year, no bowl game. Lorenzo White got hurt. Then the next year, Rose Bowl. And going into that season in year 5, George Perlis was one of 4 or 5 coaches nationally that Sports Illustrated had written in a cartoon that were on the hot seat chopping block. And as Michigan State ended up having a very successful year, George Perlis made sure to make fun of Sports Illustrated about that. But I mean, you need to show, like I said earlier with Billy Napier, if you're losing games, you need to show that there's progress. You need to show that there's physical progress. This year, they had some injuries and so forth. They wanted to be playing their best football at the end of the year. It didn't happen. They struggled in the second half of games for whatever reason, where it's a different physicality situation in the Big Ten. Jonathan Smith mentioned the line of scrimmage means a lot here now, he says. And line of scrimmage is important everywhere, but until you get in it, you don't really know. Joe Paterno didn't know until he got in it. When he was at Penn State and an independent, he was building his teams, and he said this, to compete with Miami and Florida State and having linebackers that could cover Cleveland Gary out of the backfield, running backs. And when Penn State came to the Big Ten, Paterno felt that his linebackers were undersized, and some of his defensive linemen were as well. And it took a while to cycle that out to get back up to where they could really compete for a Big Ten championship and become Penn State again. Not until he got into the Big Ten did he realize that. I realize that's a different generation, but I think it's a good chance that some of the similar realizations were taking place with Jonathan Smith and his staff. So how does that translate to what you do in spring practice or preseason practice? More physicality during training camp than you're accustomed to? I don't know. But at some point, that adaptation and how successful that adaptation is will be borne out on the scoreboard and in the wins and losses. And that'll take care of itself, but it'll take a couple of years to really get an idea. I'll give you an example, like Michigan, when they had Rich Rodriguez, a lot of people thought that was dangerous when he came to the Big Ten, and some parts of it worked, some didn't. But he never really had a Pat White type of quarterback. When he had Pat White at West Virginia, that offense was gangbusters. Different conference. Came to Michigan and had, was it Stephen Threet, a couple others, and he was gone before he was able to get his own trigger man. So I don't know if he eventually would have been a success or not. And some programs have a quicker trigger, but these guys have to get their offensive line in. Nobody's offense works without an offensive line. That was a big difference between Indiana and Michigan State. Cignetti inherited a roster that had an offensive line that was functional, proven Big Ten offensive linemen. They went into the portal and added a right tackle from Wisconsin. And we talked about it before, what they've done elsewhere. Got the best quarterback from the MAC, the best defensive tackle from the MAC, one of the best wide receivers from the MAC, best wide receiver from Texas Tech, and you brought in some other players from James Madison, 2 or 3 of whom are NFL players, and it all mixed together with an easy, manageable schedule, and they were well coached, and they did a good job. But they had an offensive line. None of that works without that offensive line. Michigan State did not inherit an offensive line like that. So now, so you're losing Luke Newman, you're losing Tanner Miller. Baldwin, never quite really got on track. Stanton Ramil has shown some good things at left tackle, but that's about it. Lepo struggled there at right tackle. Is he still around? We'll have to wait and see. He's got to keep working. And everything else is a big question mark. Yeah, there's some young guys that showed some promise, but I don't know how you can expect much from a team until an offensive line some seeds have been planted and they've been fertilized and they've grown for a couple years. You can do a few things in the portal. Refurbishing an offensive line, a total overhaul of an offensive line, I don't know if that's possible in the transfer portal. So there's somewhere around that. Question 7, Iron Sharpens Iron from Pentwater, Michigan. He says, Jim, question number 1, real or artificial Christmas tree? Real. Real tree. Smells good up there. Question 2, any information on Coach Meat's replacement? I don't know if they're going to have a cornerbacks coach, or if Blue Adams takes over the entire secondary like he did at Oregon State. I don't know. So that's the first part. I don't know. Secondly, no, I've not heard anything. I've not heard any rumors about who that might be. Question 8, Joe Ski Sparty from West Bloomfield says, anyone on the portal list can you see returning? I just went down the list a moment ago. No. First of all those players have had their bios removed from the official website. So, no, I don't see any of those guys coming back. Last year at this time, some Michigan State players were in the portal. Jonathan Smith was coming in trying to keep some people out of the portal and try to re-recruit some people because it was a different situation. But this time, I think it's a one-way door. I don't think they can get in and come back. You don't want your whole team testing the waters every year. If you go, you're gone. And we're breaking the plate. Go find a meal somewhere else. That's why you got to run a program, I think. I don't know that for sure. It's a new landscape, new climate. We'll have to, as observers, we're all looking around the country to see who's going to be doing things well. And I can see why a program would do it the way I just mentioned, which is if you step a foot in the portal, nice knowing you. You got to have some deterrence about people leaving. You can't play both sides of the fence, literally both sides of the fence, because the coaches can't be hung up waiting to see what your decision's going to be. And you need your guys to say, man, I don't know if I want to go to the portal because I like it here. And I like my teammates, and I like the situation. I think I might be worth a little bit more money, and I think I might be able to start somewhere else, but I'm not ready to really go into the portal because I like it here. That deterrent can help you build a program. Question number 9, James Windham from Holt, Michigan says, do you see Aiden Childs taking a big step next year? Is Brian Lindgren really the quarterback developer we've heard? It didn't sound like Oregon State fans were too happy with him. Some say Bray and the defense made Jonathan Smith and the Oregon State staff look good. Thank you and happy holidays, my man. At Oregon State, the defense wasn't very good. That's why the defensive coordinator was not invited to come to Michigan State. That's just my read from the outside. I don't know that for a fact. That's what it looked like to me. That was a program that was built on physical run game offense and explosive plays off of it. It was not built on defense. So I disagree with that. You can find fans that'll say anything. I mentioned this on the message board a few weeks ago when I was in Oregon. Michigan State was playing Oregon. I was like the last guy to leave the press box. And there was a guy that comes through that checks things. He kind of works at the stadium. He had his Oregon Duck stuff on. And he goes, hey, you from Michigan? I go, yeah. I cover Michigan State. Hey, will you tell Jonathan Smith that I'm a Beaver fan? I work here at Oregon, but I'm a Beaver fan, and we miss him. And everybody, the Oregon State fan, the Beaver fans, they're going to realize that we miss him. He did a great job here. I understand why he left. I wish he didn't, but I miss him, and we're all going to miss him. And tell him that he did a great job. A guy told me this. He works for the Ducks at the stadium. So you've heard from some people that say it one way. I talked to a guy that saw it the other way. And Lindgren, I thought Michigan State's offense the first half of the season did. I mentioned it on the show here. I was impressed at how wide receivers were always open. they always had receivers open. And for years, Michigan State had trouble getting separation, right? Second half of the season, not so much of that. Not so much separation. I asked Jonathan Smith about that, and he said, well, we got film out there, so teams know what we're going to do, so that's part of it. And I'm not sure what the other reasons were. Never got the run game going. That's part of it. Didn't have a lot of pass protection. That's part of it. They need Aiden Childs to do better in terms of making reads and pre-snap reads and anticipating where he's going to go when the ball is snapped and those things. I thought he did a better job getting to second and third reads as the season went along. Not great at it, but progress. And Lindgren agreed with that. Last year when I looked at what he did as a true freshman at Oregon State, I think, pretty much at every completion he had all season. And at the end of the year, maybe a couple of times he went to a second read, but everything else was first read, hard play action, first read, which doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but you got to build on that. He's a true freshman. He was 17 years old. I understand it. This year made some progress fast enough. Maybe not. They want faster progress, but he's a guy with a lot of will and determination and arm talent and physical talent and commitment. So that commitment can become greater when you don't have as much success as you would like to have. He avoided turnovers late in the season. That was good. But yeah, Lindgren's got more to prove too. All these guys do. Question 10. Hey, Jim, Die Hard. This is Roxy from Grand Haven. He asks me, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? There's some scenes that involve Christmas, and some people are like, that's not a Christmas movie. It's an action thriller. I have never seen Die Hard. I'm proud to say that. Question 11. Hey, Jim, I'm wondering what you think will be the final outcome of the Michigan cheating scandal. Just some minor fines and loss of scholarships, or anything more severe such as bowl bans and or title vacancies? I will be truly disgusted if there aren't any serious repercussions. That's from Sparty in Pawleys Island, South Carolina. He's asking me what I think the final outcome will be. There's still some stuff rummaging around a little bit, some rumors and so forth. I don't know. You know, I said earlier that I'd be shocked if anything came down on Michigan. But I've heard some scuttlebutt about some sticking points here and there that Michigan might have asked for a little more of an extension on some things because some other things were being looked at that they didn't anticipate and so forth. I'll say this. Go back to 12 months ago when Michigan was playing Alabama. And remember with the Alabama player, there's an Alabama player, can't remember who it was. He said, he was kind of asked about getting ready to play Michigan. And it was media day for college football playoff. And when it's media day, it's out of Alabama's hands. So there's players that are made available and it's just a free-for-all interviews. And one of those players, you can go find it. He was asked about getting ready for Michigan. And he said, well, at Alabama, we're not using our laptops for this because, because Michigan, breaks into your laptops. In so many words, he said that. If I got that, it's not exactly what he said, but it's what he insinuated. Fact is, Alabama did not use their laptops for preparation because they did not trust. They thought that there was a breach of trust. They thought that there was a chance that Michigan could infiltrate their laptops. Where did they get that idea? Where did Alabama get that idea that Michigan might be able to breach their laptops? I'm not making this up. Go back and listen to it. The reason I mention that is because around here in East Lansing, there was some smoke around there that they thought that things like that were happening. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not saying it's fact. These are not even official allegations. We don't know for sure that that's something that the NCAA is looking into. But if it is something they're looking into, and if they did find something along those lines, and I'm talking about getting into the laptops of a football program, a program's laptops, and when you get in there, you can see what plays they have and what they're working on in practice. Who was the tight end for Ohio State? And Connor Stalions answered to this and said, it's no big deal. It was obvious it was going to be a screen because this is a universal sign for a screen. And he answered the question. Was it Cade Stover? It was a former tight end at Ohio State. And he was talking about when he was at Ohio State, they played Michigan. And Ohio State was running a play that they hadn't run all year. It was a tight end screen. And they're in a formation I think they hadn't run all year. And it's a play they hadn't run all year. And Ohio State gets into a formation. And the tight end says that the Michigan players were all calling out tight end screen. And he's like, that's a play we've not run all year. And they knew what we were doing. So he thought, he wasn't surprised with the Connor Stalions thing. Now, Stalions' explanation was, well, it was kind of universal stuff. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm just saying if the NCAA finds that Michigan and some of their people somewhere in the building had infiltrated laptops, Because we know they went in there and confiscated some laptops. Is that right? And someone else got in trouble for some things. I'm just talking in for instance. I'm just talking fairy tale stuff here. But listen to what the Alabama guy said. I'm not pulling this out of it. I'm not pulling this out of nowheresville. If they find that some people in and around that program broke into laptops, got scouting information, and utilized it, then the NCAA cannot have that team serve and be recognized as their national champion. Can't. Am I wrong? Can't. I'm not saying that's factual. I'm not saying that those are even allegations that the NCAA is talking about right now. I'm just saying listen to the Alabama guy, and there was smoke around here. I'm just saying if that becomes the case, then they can't be recognized as national champion. All right. So we don't know. I mean, I don't know if that's. I mean, everything's very quiet about all that. We don't know what it's going to be. Everybody thinks it's just sign stealing with stallions. It might be more than that. I don't know. I'm just talking about. I'm just saying listen to the Alabama guy. If that they weren't doing that just for the heck of it. They were doing that based on something that they felt was concrete, but I don't know. They might look into it and they might not find anything. Hard to say. I don't know. But anyway, that's all the questions we've got time for tonight. It's been fun, right? Appreciate everybody coming and playing along. Appreciate all the likes and the support that we have at SpartanMag.com. Go over to SpartanMag.com, become a subscriber. $1 for a week. You'll try it. You'll like it. And we'd love to have you over there. In the meantime, we'll be covering Michigan State versus Oakland University in Detroit on Tuesday night. Maybe we'll have another one of these on Wednesday. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, take care. Appreciate everybody checking in. Appreciate all the comments. Actually, I should probably look to see. I invited people to post underrated players. And I didn't go through to see who you mentioned. I don't see any. Kevin Baldas says Jack Allen. Jack Allen was a great player for a good offensive line, a very good offensive line, part of a very, very good team, maybe even a great team. I do feel like Jack Allen as center did get enough publicity and appreciation. Might not be the type of underrated guy, but you're right, Jack Allen was good. Brian Perini, can you please make Velling a captain this year? This kid is all in on the program. I want him influencing recruits and transfers immediately. He's got the maturity and the work ethic. He does. He's got to block better, and he did not have as good of a season as he expected this year. That's Brendan Perini from Long Osland, New York. He doesn't mean Long Island. Is that a typo? I'm going to say it's a typo. Raymond Sebastian says, Spartan Mag, the greatest show ever for MSU. Love Comp and Paul. Thank you, Raymond. Appreciate that. Here's a good one. Desert Sparty says, I always thought TJ Turner was underrated. TJ Turner, physical inside linebacker, late in the Saban era. Physical. I like that one a lot. For the 1999 team, TJ Turner was good. I'll go for, yes, good one. Desert Sparty says, Charles Brantley's going to Ole Miss. Matt Dorsey says Turner was good, but his senior season was somewhat of a disappointment, if memory serves me correctly. I agree with that, too. TJ Turner was around, I think, for the first year of Bobby Williams. Or was it 99? I know that he made a real good stick on a goal line situation when they beat Oregon in 1999. TJ Turner did. Good, physical, hard-nosed guy. Turned down Notre Dame to come to Michigan State. He's an underrated three-star type of guy back then. I don't even think there was a star system back then, but he's like a modern-day three-star. Matt Dorsey says a guy who I think was another linebacker who never got a ton of hype but was valuable was Tawan Jones. I agree. Tawan Jones from New Baltimore, Michigan? Anchor Bay. Physical. Could run. Built like a big, strong inside linebacker, but he played out in the slot a little bit. Tawan Jones was good for sure. Kenneth says Spartan, Thousand Oaks, California. That's where Sparky Anderson's hometown was, he believes. Sparky Anderson used to hang out and play sandlot ball with Buckwheat from Little Rascals. You guys knew that, right? He said Buckwheat would they'd drive him up in a limousine, let him out, and they'd play baseball together. Sparky Anderson. George Sparky Anderson. Doors Fan 91 says Merry Christmas, everybody. Yeah, the Oregon State linebackers. I'll look into that. Zach Edey's LinkedIn. I'll look into those Oregon State linebackers. I meant to touch on that tonight. Steve Meyer from McKinney, Texas. I guess that's it. All right, man, that's going to be it. Appreciate everybody. We might be coming in another one this coming Wednesday, perhaps. Appreciate everybody checking in. Appreciate the support. We'll see you next time. Take care of each other. Be good. Next time.